How Carl Jung might analyze viral internet trends you scroll without thinking. The screen glows, a flood of faces, jokes, and sounds. A man repeating the same dance you've seen 1,000 times. A gray figure with blank eyes captioned NPC. A cartoon frog. A distorted grin. A phrase that makes sense only if you've lived inside the internet long enough. You laugh. You keep scrolling. But if Carl Jung were sitting beside you, he might not laugh. He might say, "This is the unconscious speaking." Jung believed that societies dream the way individuals do. Just as your mind invents images when you sleep, culture invents images when it scrolls. These images, memes, trends, viral rituals are not random. They are symbols. They are fragments of something deeper, signs of fears and desires we rarely admit. The NPC meme mocking people who act like programmed machines. TikTok dances, endless waves of synchronized movement. Doom posting, young people turning despair into ironic humor. To Jung, none of these are trivial. They are echoes of ancient archetypes, patterns older than history, reappearing in digital form. What does it mean that millions share the same blank gray face to laugh at? What does it mean that billions dance the same dances, repeating them like ritual prayers? Why do people bond over ironic despair, finding comfort in mocking the very collapse they fear? Jung would tell us, these are masks of the collective unconscious, revealing what society cannot say outright. Every age has symbols. Medieval Europe had stained glass windows and crucifixions painted in gold. The Renaissance had angels, demons, and alchemists' diagrams. The 19th century had political cartoons, dark novels, and revolutionary posters. Our age has memes. Shorter, faster, disposable, but no less powerful. They move with the speed of light, and yet they touch something as old as myth. Jung warned about what happens when we dismiss symbols as just jokes. A joke is never just a joke when millions repeat it. A ritual is never meaningless when billions perform it together. Behind the humor hides the shadow of a culture. Its loneliness, its longing, its despair, its hidden hunger for meaning. If you want to understand our time, not through statistics, not through news headlines, but through its living unconscious, you must study its viral trends. Jung would not ignore them. He would dissect them. He would ask, what archetypes do they reveal? What myths are we secretly living out? And what dangers lie in refusing to see them? So tonight, we will enter this world. We will follow Jung into the digital unconscious. We will decode the NPC meme, the TikTok dance ritual, the rise of doom posting. We will see how our collective shadow speaks through them. And we will ask, what do these symbols tell us about ourselves, about our time, and about the futures we may be building without even realizing it? If this already feels unsettling, if a part of you wonders whether the memes you've laughed at were laughing back at you, then you are in the right place. What you're about to hear is not entertainment. It's analysis. It's an invitation to see your world differently. Carl Jung believed that those who ignore their unconscious become slaves to it. The same is true of societies. If we treat our trends as meaningless noise, we risk being shaped by forces we never understand. But if we pay attention, if we analyze, if we confront the shadow, we reclaim some measure of freedom. This channel exists for people who don't want to remain blind, for thinkers who want to question the structures of their time, for those who feel that what passes as culture often hides what matters most. So, if you are ready to see viral trends not as distractions but as symbols of something deeper, then subscribe, join the conversation, and share your thoughts below. Each like, each comment, each share helps this exploration reach more people who need it. Remember, memes are not just jokes. They are modern myths. And myths, as Jung warned, are never harmless. The collective unconscious goes viral. When Carl Jung first spoke of the collective unconscious, he described it as a hidden layer of the human mind, something deeper than memory, deeper than culture, deeper than what any one person could create. It was not personal, but collective. It did not belong to you or me as individuals, but to humanity as a whole. Within it, he argued, lived what he called archetypes. Universal patterns and symbols that shape how we imagine gods, heroes, enemies, lovers, and fools. Most people at the time thought Jung's idea was strange, even mystical. But what if we told you that you encounter these archetypes every single day, perhaps more than any generation in history? Not in myths carved into stone, not in religious rituals performed in temples, but in something so ordinary that you barely notice it. In the scrolling feed, in a meme, in a viral video repeated until it becomes part of everyday language. Stop and think about it. Why do memes work at all? Why can an image or phrase go from obscurity to global recognition in a matter of days? Why does a picture of a distracted boyfriend looking away from his girlfriend resonate with millions of people across cultures, languages, and backgrounds? Why does a gray, expressionless NPC face communicate so instantly, without explanation, what it means to feel trapped in a script? Jung would argue because the meme taps into something we already know but do not know we know. The collective unconscious is like a reservoir of images, waiting to be activated. When one of those images is touched, when a modern symbol aligns with an ancient archetype, it spreads like wildfire. Feels familiar, even if you've never seen it before. That is the eerie magic of virality. It is not just chance. It is resonance. Think of dreams. You fall asleep, and your mind conjures images you did not invent. Strange landscapes, faceless people, gods or monsters, absurd scenarios. Dreams are not random. They are symbols. They speak in riddles about your fears, desires, and unresolved conflicts. Jung believed that what dreams do for the individual, culture does for society. And memes are society's dreams. They are the images our collective unconscious spits out when it cannot speak directly. Consider the way memes repeat. One joke mutates into 1,000 variations. One format becomes a vessel for endless reinterpretations. It mirrors myth. Every culture tells the story of a great flood, or a dying and rising god, or a trickster who disrupts order. The details differ, but the core is the same. In the digital sphere, this repetition happens in hyperspeed. What myths once took centuries to spread, memes accomplish in days. But here lies the danger. Myths once had guardians, priests, elders, storytellers, who interpreted them, gave them context, and connected them to meaning. Memes, by contrast, spread without interpretation. They do not pass through guidance or wisdom. They replicate automatically, like viruses. We laugh, we share, we repeat, rarely stopping to ask what the symbol is doing to us, what shadow it might be casting. Jung warned that ignoring symbols is perilous. They act upon us whether or not we understand them. The collective unconscious does not care if you call its images serious or trivial. A dancing TikTok, a despairing cartoon face, a distorted frog. They are all fragments of the same deep psychic reservoir. If we dismiss them as mere distractions, we leave ourselves open to being shaped by them in ways we do not see. Look closely at how memes unify people. Strangers across the globe laugh at the same joke, participate in the same trend, speak the same symbolic language. This is no different from ancient rituals where a community would gather around a fire, telling the same story of gods and monsters to remind themselves who they were. But where myth united people around meaning, memes often unite people around emptiness. The ritual remains, but the substance is gone. It is ritual without sacredness, a rhythm without music. And yet, to mock memes as shallow is to miss their psychological importance. They reveal what we cannot say aloud. A culture that endlessly shares NPC jokes reveals its anxiety about conformity. A culture that dances the same routines reveals its hunger for belonging. A culture that laughs at doom posting reveals its despair disguised as irony. These are not just jokes. They are the collective unconscious whispering, or perhaps screaming, through symbols. Jung might say, if you want to know who you are, watch what you dream. If you want to know who a society is, watch what it memes. Both are masks of the unconscious, both are mirrors of the shadow. So when you scroll through your feed and stumble upon something viral, pause. Ask yourself, why this? Why now? Why did this image resonate with millions? Somewhere, behind the laughter, behind the absurdity, lies an archetype. Perhaps it is the fool mocking authority. Perhaps it is the trickster turning order into chaos. Perhaps it is the shadow, revealing what we would rather not see. We live in an age where the collective unconscious is not hidden in temples, or in epic poems, or in whispered myths. It is right here, glowing on our screens, looping endlessly. Jung would warn us not to look away, for what we see in our feed is not just entertainment. It is myth. It is symbol. It is the dream of our time. And like all dreams, it is trying to tell us something. Historical parallels, the old archetypes in new skins. When we look at a meme today, it feels modern, even disposable. A joke made on a Tuesday may be forgotten by Friday. Yet if you take a step back, if you see it not as a fleeting novelty but as part of a long story, you realize something strange. What we now call viral trends are not new. They are echoes of something old, almost timeless. They are simply the latest skin worn by archetypes that have haunted culture for centuries. In the Middle Ages, long before TikTok or Instagram, Europe had carnivals. For a few days each year, social order dissolved. Peasants dressed as kings, kings were mocked as fools, the sacred was parroted, and the absurd became law. These carnivals were not random. They were society's pressure valve. They allowed the collective unconscious to express itself in masks, laughter, and chaos. Jung would have recognized in these festivals the archetype of the trickster, the force that inverts hierarchies, mocks authority, and reveals hidden truths through parody. Is a meme so different? Take, for example, the endless cycle of formats where serious figures are undercut by silly captions. Politicians, celebrities, or authority figures are transformed into jokes, stripped of dignity, turned into icons of ridicule. This is carnival reappearing in digital form. The meme is the mask of the fool, reminding the collective that no power is untouchable, that every image of authority hides a shadow ready to be laughed at. In the 18th and 19th centuries, satire became a weapon. Pamphlets and cartoons circulated, often anonymously, poking fun at kings, ministers, or social elites. These pamphlets were dangerous, sometimes banned, sometimes punished with imprisonment. But they spread anyway, because the archetype of ridicule cannot be suppressed. Society needs its tricksters. Without them, power grows too rigid, too inflated. Jung would argue that satire was one way the collective unconscious corrected itself, balancing the persona of authority with the shadow of mockery. Today, that same archetype thrives in memes. Except now, instead of pamphlets passed hand to hand, images travel at the speed of light. The archetype has not changed. The costume has. Even the NPC meme, which paints certain people as scripted, lifeless, incapable of independent thought, has historical parallels. In earlier centuries, satirists mocked their opponents as sheep, parrots, or machines wound up by their masters. In the 19th century, political cartoons depicted masses as faceless crowds, indistinguishable and obedient. The fear of the lifeless human, the archetype of the soulless crowd, has always haunted culture. The meme simply gives it a new face, a gray polygon head, a blank stare. The same pattern holds for ritual. Long before viral dances, societies performed communal movements. Tribal dances marked harvests, victories, deaths, and initiations. Soldiers marched in unison. Religious choirs sang the same notes. These were not entertainment. They were symbolic. They aligned individuals with the group, gave rhythm to belonging, embodied the archetype of ritual. When billions today repeat TikTok dances, Jung might say they are unconsciously reenacting the ancient archetype of ritual, only stripped of sacredness, emptied into entertainment. Yet the psychological function remains: to belong, to participate in a shared symbolic action. Even despair has its echoes. The doomer meme, a young figure lost in nihilism, cigarette glowing in the dark, is not new. In the Weimar Republic of the 1920s, satirical magazines depicted figures drowning in ennui, staring at crumbling cities, mocking life as meaningless. In Victorian England, black humor circulated in underground poetry, laughing at death and futility. These images, like today's doom posting, are expressions of the archetype of the wounded soul, the recognition of despair turned into art or laughter. The only difference is that now, the despair loops endlessly in timelines, instead of being tucked into dusty journals or underground pamphlets. What becomes clear is this: every age produces images that feel modern, yet they are always variations of the same eternal patterns. The trickster mocks, the ritual unites, the shadow despairs, the hero rises and falls. The archetypes remain unchanged, only their costumes vary. Jung insisted that we cannot escape archetypes. They live in us, beneath reason older than history. We can only recognize them or be ruled by them. When we see memes as trivial, we miss the truth that they are the collective unconscious wearing new clothes. But there is a subtle danger here. In the past, when archetypes emerged in ritual or satire, they were often interpreted within a larger frame of meaning. The carnival was tied to the church calendar, a controlled inversion of order. Satirical pamphlets were debated in salons or censored by kings, always placed in relation to politics or morality. Even despairing art often pointed beyond itself, toward the possibility of redemption. Memes lack this frame. They appear, spread, vanish. There is no guardian of meaning, no elder to interpret, no ritual calendar to contain. They are fragments of the unconscious, unleashed without anchor. They amuse, but they also confuse. They connect, but they also dissolve. Without context, without wisdom, they risk becoming pure noise. Archetypes left untethered can devour as easily as they can enlighten. This is why Jung's lens matters. By looking at memes historically, we see that they are not harmless jokes but recurring archetypes. And by recognizing the archetype, we reclaim power. We stop being passive consumers of the image and start becoming interpreters of it. The Stoics understood something similar. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations that every event is recycled, every face repeated, every idea old. All things are the same, familiar in experience, fleeting in time, sordid in content. What he meant is that novelty is an illusion. What feels new is always ancient. By remembering this, we avoid being seduced by the illusion of freshness. We see through it. The memes of our time are not unique. They are simply the carnival masks, the satirical pamphlets, the despairing cartoons of an age that scrolls instead of gathering. Recognizing this does not make them meaningless. It makes them more meaningful, for it reveals that, through these fragments, the collective unconscious continues to speak. And if Jung were alive today, he might warn us. Do not dismiss these images. Do not think yourself immune. Every viral joke carries with it the weight of centuries. And every time you share one, you are not just laughing. You are participating in a ritual as old as humanity itself. Shadow projection in memes, the hidden truth behind ridicule. Carl Jung believed that every human being carries a shadow. It is the part of ourselves that we do not want to see, the traits we deny, the desires we repress, the fears we refuse to acknowledge. To live in society, we build a persona, a mask that shows the world what we want it to see. But behind that mask lies everything inconvenient, shameful, or dangerous to our self-image. The shadow does not vanish simply because we hide it. Instead, it leaks out, in dreams, in slips of the tongue, and most powerfully in projection. Projection is when we see in others what we cannot face in ourselves. We mock what we secretly fear. We condemn what we secretly desire. We laugh at what we cannot accept as part of our own nature. Jung warned that projection is not just a personal defense mechanism. It is also a collective one. Whole societies project their shadow onto outsiders, minorities, enemies, or scapegoats. And in the digital age, this projection often takes the form of memes. Think of how ridicule works online. A viral meme rarely attacks a random target. Instead, it latches onto a weakness, an awkward trait, or a vulnerability that feels oddly familiar. We laugh at the NPC not because we believe others are mindless, but because we secretly fear that we are. The blank gray face is unsettling precisely because it mirrors our own suspicion that we, too, are scripted by algorithms, routines, or cultural scripts. By projecting that fear onto an image, we release tension. We laugh at the NPC so that we do not have to admit how much of our own life is automated. Consider doom posting. Endless memes about nihilism, despair, and hopeless futures. The humor is often sharp, even brutal, yet it resonates because it projects a hidden truth. Many young people feel powerless in the face of climate change, economic instability, and political dysfunction. To confess despair openly is heavy, but to post it ironically, wrapped in humor, makes it bearable. The meme becomes a safe disguise for a collective shadow, the fear that the future is collapsing. Laughter hides tears. Projection transforms paralysis into content. This dynamic is not new. In ancient societies, rituals of ridicule served similar functions. Villages mocked fools or scapegoats to purge collective anxiety. Carnivals inverted order to temporarily release suppressed tension. Political cartoons exaggerated features of leaders not only to criticize them but also to externalize public frustration. Memes continue this tradition. They allow the collective shadow to be expressed, but in a form that feels safe, humorous, detached. The danger, Jung would argue, is that unchecked projection blinds us. By projecting our shadow outward, we never confront it inwardly. When we label others as NPCs, we reinforce the illusion that we are free thinkers, when in fact we may be equally bound by cultural scripts. When we laugh at doom posting, we risk trivializing genuine despair rather than addressing it. Projection provides temporary relief, but it prevents transformation. Here, the Stoics offer a useful counterpoint. Epictetus warned that blaming others for our misery is the mark of the uneducated. The mature person, he said, takes responsibility for their own mind. Marcus Aurelius echoed this. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. These are practical instructions for avoiding projection. Instead of mocking others for their supposed lifelessness, the Stoic examines their own thoughts. Am I living consciously or drifting on habit? Instead of ridiculing despair, the Stoic confronts it directly. What can I control in this moment, even if the world feels broken? To apply this in everyday life, imagine encountering the NPC meme. Instead of using it to ridicule others, you could take it as a mirror. Where in my life am I acting mechanically? Where am I speaking in scripts I did not write? Do I follow trends unthinkingly? Do I outsource my judgments to the crowd? The meme then becomes not a weapon of projection but a tool of introspection. Jung would call this integrating the shadow. The Stoics would call it reclaiming one's mind. Likewise with doom posting. Instead of simply laughing at despair, one might pause and ask, why does this resonate with me? Am I avoiding my own sense of hopelessness? Am I trivializing a truth that requires action? The Stoic response would be to focus on what is within control: habits, virtues, daily actions. Despair is acknowledged, but not surrendered to. In this way, memes that once served as shields of projection can be transformed into catalysts of growth. Even on a societal level, projection plays out through viral culture. Consider how quickly blame circulates online. Whole groups are reduced to stereotypes, simplified into symbols, ridiculed for traits that reflect broader anxieties. The collective unconscious uses memes as shorthand to project shadows onto the other. Yet Jung would warn that the more a society projects its darkness outward, the more that darkness grows within. Shadows do not disappear when ignored. They fester. This is why the study of memes is not trivial but necessary. They are mirrors of projection, snapshots of what society cannot admit directly. They reveal the collective shadow in its rawest form: fear of conformity, despair of collapse, hunger for belonging. To laugh without analysis is to remain blind. To analyze without humility is to risk arrogance. But to interpret memes as symbolic projections is to gain insight into both culture and self. Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Viral humor is often that darkness. It is the unspoken shadow, clothed in absurdity. If we dare to look, we may discover truths about ourselves we would rather not face. But without that confrontation, we remain trapped in endless projection. Scrolling, laughing, never seeing. The internet has given us an infinite mirror. But most of us use it only to reflect others' shadows. Jung would challenge us to turn the mirror inward. The Stoics would remind us that the only true freedom lies in mastery of the self. Together, these perspectives offer a way forward, to use memes not as distractions from our unconscious, but as doorways into it. Anonymity and archetypes. Why the faceless internet feels mythic. One of the strangest qualities of the internet is its anonymity. In physical life, we are bound by our names, faces, reputations, and histories. Online, those constraints loosen. A profile picture can be a cartoon frog, a faceless avatar, or a username that hides all trace of identity. In this space of masks and shadows, Carl Jung's insights about archetypes become more vivid than ever. To Jung, the persona, the social mask we wear to function in society, was necessary but limited. It allowed us to present ourselves as stable, predictable individuals. But behind the persona lurked the unconscious. The shadow, the archetypes, the instincts that society forces us to hide. In anonymity, that persona dissolves. Freed from accountability, people often release sides of themselves they would never show in public. This is why online culture feels raw, exaggerated, even mythic. Without the mask of everyday politeness, we slip into older masks. Masks of gods, tricksters, fools, demons, and heroes. Think of how easily archetypal figures emerge online. The NPC meme does not show a real person's face. It shows a faceless, gray mask. Its lack of individuality is what makes it universal. Anyone can project onto it. It is not one person who is mindless. It is the archetype of mindlessness itself. Similarly, the doomer character has a blank, tired face, cigarette glowing in the dark, detached from individuality. These figures are closer to myth than to portraiture. They function as digital archetypes. Simplified, faceless, symbolic. Anonymity makes this possible. In the physical world, satire needs caricature. It exaggerates the features of politicians or celebrities to make them ridiculous. But online, satire works through facelessness. The absence of individuality invites projection. The archetype comes forward because the human disappears. This recalls ancient rituals where masks played a central role. In tribal ceremonies, masks of animals or gods allowed participants to step outside individuality and embody archetypes larger than themselves. The mask was not decoration, it was transformation. To wear the mask of a jaguar was to become the jaguar, to channel its spirit. To wear the mask of a god was to bring that god into the community. Jung saw in these practices a direct encounter with the collective unconscious. The internet, too, is a theater of masks. Behind usernames and avatars, we step into roles. Some become tricksters, trolling and mocking with chaotic energy. Some become sages, dispensing wisdom under pseudonyms. Some become shadows, unleashing anger or despair they repress in daily life. The anonymity of the screen acts like the mask of ritual. It dissolves the personal, unleashes the archetypal. But anonymity also has its dangers. Without accountability, the shadow often dominates. People project hostility, ridicule, or cruelty they would never express face-to-face. Memes spread faster because no individual is responsible for them. The mask protects, but it also corrupts. Jung warned that when the shadow is not confronted consciously, it erupts in destructive ways. Online anonymity often reveals this. An endless stream of ridicule, envy, despair, all protected by faceless avatars. Yet the facelessness also explains why memes resonate across cultures. A blank NPC face can be recognized in Tokyo, New York, or Lagos without translation. A doomer image speaks despair in every language. A dance trend unites billions in synchronized ritual without shared words. Facelessness is universality. It strips away the individual so that the archetype shines through. The Stoics would have recognized both the freedom and the danger in this. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that behind the names and titles of people lay the same basic human traits: hunger, fear, desire, mortality. He practiced a kind of mental anonymity, stripping away identities to see the archetype of humanity itself. At the same time, Epictetus warned against giving in to the passions of the crowd. In anonymity, the crowd's emotions can sweep us into anger, envy, or ridicule without our consent. To remain free, the Stoic cultivates self-command, refusing to be carried away by the faceless multitude. In practice, this means seeing the internet for what it is, a modern stage of archetypes. When you scroll, you are not encountering individuals so much as masks. Each meme is an archetype, each avatar a role. The danger lies in mistaking these archetypes for reality, forgetting that real people with complex lives exist behind them. Jung would caution us, the mask is powerful, but it is still a mask. If we forget that, we lose touch with the personal and drown in the collective. But there is also a strange opportunity here. If memes reveal archetypes, then the internet is an archive of the collective unconscious more vast than any library of myth. Never before has humanity externalized its archetypes at such scale, producing millions of symbolic images each day. For those who know how to interpret, this is a map of the cultural psyche, laid bare in pixels. The facelessness of the internet is not an accident. It is the very condition that allows archetypes to flourish. In the absence of individuality, universality emerges. The NPC is not John or Maria, it is everyman. The doomer is not a neighbor, it is despair personified. The TikTok dancer is not a celebrity, it is ritual energy given form. This is why memes feel oddly dreamlike. They are not portraits of reality, but symbolic masks of the unconscious. To live consciously in this environment, one must practice what both Jung and the Stoics taught. From Jung, recognize the archetype, name the shadow, refuse to project blindly. From the Stoics, remain anchored in self-command, see through masks, and cultivate equanimity amid the crowd. Otherwise, the faceless sea of memes sweeps you into roles you did not choose, shadows you do not own, rituals you do not understand. Anonymity does not free us from archetypes, it exposes us to them more directly. The internet is not chaos. It is myth wearing new clothes. And if we are not careful, we risk becoming not interpreters of the myth, but unconscious actors in its play. Stoic grounding, how to live consciously among archetypes. Carl Jung warned that we are never free from the collective unconscious. Archetypes move beneath the surface of culture, shaping our dreams, our myths, and even the memes we share. The question is not whether they influence us, but whether we recognize their influence. To live without awareness is to be carried along blindly by symbols we do not understand. To live with awareness is to transform symbols into guides, mirrors, even teachers. The Stoics, though centuries before Jung, would have recognized this choice. They, too, believed that much of life lies outside our control, that the crowd, fate, and nature carry us like a river. But they also believed that freedom begins in the mind. Epictetus wrote, "Men are disturbed not by things, but by the view which they take of them." Jung might have said something similar. We are not disturbed by archetypes themselves, but by our unconscious entanglement with them. To see the symbol clearly is to take back power. Memes as mirrors, not weapons. When a meme resonates with you, the first instinct is to laugh, share, or project. But both Jung and the Stoics suggest a different response. Pause. Ask, why does this image strike me? What part of my shadow is it touching? What desire or fear does it reflect? For example, the NPC meme. The unreflective response is ridicule. Other people are mindless, but I am not. The reflective response is humility. Where in my life am I scripted? What habits or beliefs do I follow without thought? The Stoic Marcus Aurelius advised himself daily to watch his own mind, to ask whether he was truly living in accordance with reason or merely repeating what the crowd expected. The meme, then, becomes a prompt for self-examination rather than projection. The same holds for doom posting. Instead of laughing at despair or dismissing it, one might ask, why does this image of hopelessness resonate? Am I trivializing my own anxiety by wrapping it in irony? Am I allowing despair to shape my worldview without acknowledgement? Here, Stoic practice offers an answer. Separate what is in your control from what is not. You cannot stop the storms of the world, but you can govern your own actions, your own response, your own small sphere of influence. The meme reveals despair, but Stoicism teaches resilience. Relationships and the archetypal crowd viral trends also shape how we relate to one another. The crowd exerts enormous pressure to laugh at the same jokes, to share the same images, to perform the same dances. Jung would say this is the collective unconscious pulling us into archetypal patterns. The Stoics would call it the danger of the crowd. Seneca warned that spending too much time with others who are unwise makes us unwise ourselves. Associate with those who will make a better man of you, he wrote. Welcome those whom you yourself can improve. Applied to digital culture, this means becoming conscious of the symbolic environment you live in. If every meme in your feed is cynical, mocking, or despairing, those archetypes seep into your mind. If your digital community is obsessed with ridicule, your relationships will reflect ridicule. But if you cultivate spaces of depth, wisdom, and discipline, the archetypes that dominate your imagination will change. Practically, this means curating your feed as carefully as the Stoics curated their friendships. Just as Marcus chose to learn from philosophers rather than flatterers, so too can you choose to surround yourself with memes, voices, and communities that elevate rather than degrade. This is not about puritanical avoidance of humor. It is about ensuring that humor does not become the only lens through which you see the world. Charisma through calm. One of the paradoxes of internet culture is that it magnifies attention while eroding presence. People chase virality, but lose depth. Jung's process of individuation, becoming a self, not a mask, requires resisting this. The Stoics offer practical tools here, particularly for relationships and charisma. Charisma, in the Stoic sense, is not manipulation or charm. It is the quiet force of a mind that knows itself. When you are not pulled by every viral current, when you are not constantly projecting your shadow outward, you radiate steadiness. Others feel it. Marcus Aurelius never sought charisma, but his calm, reflective presence drew people to him. You can apply this directly. In conversation, resist the urge to perform like a meme, seeking quick laughs or scripted approval. Instead, listen deeply, respond thoughtfully. As Epictetus said, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. True charisma comes not from dazzling others, but from making them feel seen, heard, and grounded. In a culture addicted to speed, calmness itself is magnetic. Integrating Jung and Stoicism, Jung believed that confronting the shadow leads to integration, wholeness, and individuation. The Stoics believed that mastering one's mind leads to freedom, virtue, and peace. Together, they form a powerful response to the chaos of memes and trends. Instead of being a passive participant in viral culture, you become an interpreter. Instead of projecting your fears, you recognize them. Instead of being swept away by the crowd, you remain steady in your own principles. This is not detachment from culture, it is engagement with it on a higher level. Practical steps can help. Daily reflection. Each evening, as Marcus did, ask, what symbols shaped me today? What memes or trends captured my mind and why? Did I project my shadow onto them, or did I use them as mirrors? Control the input. Curate your digital environment with the same care the Stoics advised for friendships. The archetypes you consume shape the archetypes you embody. Practice calm presence. In relationships, resist mimicry of internet cynicism. Practice listening, patience, and clarity. Charisma grows not from projection but from presence. Embrace ritual consciously. If you join a viral dance or trend, do it with awareness. Recognize the archetype of ritual, the human hunger for belonging, and choose how to engage rather than drifting unconsciously. The final guardrail. Jung once warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The Stoics would phrase it differently. Until you govern your mind, you are a slave to it. Both are saying the same thing. The symbols will act upon you whether you see them or not. The question is whether you will see them, and in seeing them, choose how to live among them. In a culture of faceless memes, archetypes, and projections, Stoic awareness provides grounding. Jung provides interpretation. Stoicism provides discipline. Together, They allow us not only to decode the unconscious of our time but also to resist being consumed by it. And so, as Section 1 closes, we arrive at a paradox. The internet may be filled with shadows, archetypes, and rituals stripped of sacredness, but it also offers an unprecedented chance. For the first time, the collective unconscious is laid bare on a global scale. To live blindly in it is to be swept along as an unconscious actor in its play. To live consciously is to become something rarer. Not a mask, not a meme, but a self. The rise of the NPC meme in 2018, a strange gray figure began circulating across the internet. Its face was blank, polygonal, with simple lines for eyes and mouth. It was not a portrait of any real person, but a crude sketch, deliberately expressionless, deliberately dull. This was the NPC, or non-playable character, a reference borrowed from video games, where background characters repeat scripted lines without thought or variation. The joke was simple. Some people in real life, too, seemed to be scripted. They spoke in clichés, followed predictable patterns, reacted without reflection. The meme spread rapidly, provoking laughter, outrage, and debate. Critics argued that it dehumanized, reducing people to lifeless caricatures. Supporters insisted it was satire, a way of exposing conformity and unoriginality. But whether praised or condemned, the NPC struck a chord. Why? Because, as Carl Jung might argue, the NPC was not merely a joke. It was an archetype emerging from the collective unconscious, carrying with it deep fears about modern identity. To understand the NPC, we must return to Jung's concept of the persona. The persona is the mask we wear in social life, the role we play to fit expectations, the face we present to the world. It is necessary. Without a persona, we could not function in society. But the danger comes when the persona is mistaken for the whole self. Jung warned that when a person becomes fully identified with their role, they lose contact with their deeper individuality. They become a mask, nothing more. The NPC meme captures this fear with startling clarity. It is the image of the persona stripped of uniqueness. A blank, automated being repeating lines without inner life. It exaggerates what we all sense, that modern culture, with its algorithms, scripts, and ideological battles, pushes people toward mechanical conformity. Whether in politics, social media debates, or pop culture, there is a pressure to repeat the correct lines, to echo the crowd, to act like a character whose dialogue is pre-written. This is why the NPC resonates across divides. It is not confined to one political side, though each tries to use it against the other. Conservatives mock liberals as NPCs, progressives mock conservatives as NPCs, centrists mock extremists. But the deeper truth is that everyone fears becoming one. The meme is powerful precisely because it is universal. It touches the archetype of the automaton, the lifeless mask, the soulless crowd. Historically, this fear is not new. In the 19th century, philosophers like Kierkegaard and Nietzsche warned about the crowd as the death of individuality. Kierkegaard wrote that the crowd is untruth. Nietzsche mocked the herd, warning that most people live as followers, repeating what others say, fearing to think for themselves. The NPC meme is the digital echo of these anxieties. It is the archetype of the herd, condensed into a single faceless image. But Jung would add another layer. He would point out that when we call others NPCs, we are likely projecting our own fear of lifelessness. It is easier to mock others as scripted than to confront the possibility that we ourselves are. Projection shields us from anxiety, but it also blinds us. If everyone else is an NPC, then we can reassure ourselves that we are unique, awake, original. Yet the truth may be less flattering. The very act of sharing the NPC meme is itself a script, a repetition, a ritualized performance of nonconformity that ironically reveals conformity. The internet amplifies this paradox. Algorithms feed us content based on patterns of behavior, pushing us into predictable grooves. We believe we are choosing, but often the choice is pre-structured. When millions share the same meme about unoriginality, the irony becomes glaring. The NPC meme becomes the most NPC-like behavior of all. This irony is not an accident. It is the shadow peeking through. Still, The meme's popularity reveals a deep unease with modern life. People sense that they are not fully living, that much of their speech and action is borrowed from scripts. Small talk, political slogans, pop culture references, how much of daily life is original thought and how much is repetition. Jung would argue that this anxiety is not trivial. It is the psyche rebelling against over-identification with the persona. The NPC reminds us of the danger of living as nothing but a mask. But there is another side to the NPC archetype. In mythology, the lifeless figure, the puppet, the golem, the zombie, often represents not only fear but also warning. It is a mirror held up to the living, a reminder of what happens when soul is abandoned. To laugh at the NPC may be projection, but it can also be an invitation. To wake up, to resist scripts, to reclaim individuality. The archetype warns not only of what others are, but of what we risk becoming. The Stoics would approach the NPC in practical terms. Epictetus insisted that the true test of freedom is the ability to think for oneself, to govern one's own judgments rather than absorb the crowd's. He warned that most people are like actors in a play they did not write, repeating lines without reflection. The wise person, he said, accepts the role given by fate but plays it with awareness. This is the antidote to NPChood, not rejecting roles entirely, but refusing to confuse the role with the self. Marcus Aurelius provides another insight. Surrounded by flatterers and courtiers, he reminded himself daily not to lose individuality to the scripts of the crowd. Be like the promontory, he wrote, against which the waves continually break, but it stands firm and tames the fury of the water. To live consciously is to resist being swept into scripts, even when the crowd demands them. Applied to the NPC meme, the Stoic lesson is clear. Laugh if you must, but then turn inward. Where am I repeating lines unthinkingly? Where have I outsourced judgment to the crowd? Am I speaking from reason or from habit? The meme, if taken seriously, becomes a prompt for reflection. It can either deepen projection or open the path to individuation. The choice is ours. The rise of the NPC meme, then, is not a trivial joke but a profound signal. It shows that society is grappling with the fear of automation, the anxiety of conformity, the erosion of individuality in a world run by algorithms and scripts. Jung would urge us not to dismiss it. He would ask us to listen to it, to decode it, to see in its faceless mask the shadow of our time. And if we dare to see it, perhaps we can also see the way forward, to live as selves, not scripts, to reclaim the inner life from the collective persona, to resist becoming NPCs not by mocking others, but by awakening ourselves. Jung's persona and shadow, the projection behind the NPC meme. The NPC meme appears simple. A faceless gray figure, dull and mechanical, repeating lines without thought. But beneath this simplicity lies one of Jung's most important insights, the tension between the persona and the shadow. To understand why this meme resonates so powerfully, we must explore how these two aspects of the psyche shape human behavior, and how projection keeps us blind to our own conformity. The persona. The mask we wear. Jung defined the persona as the mask we construct for social life. It is not false in the sense of being fake, but it is incomplete. It represents the roles we play: student, worker, parent, friend, citizen. The persona helps us function in society, smoothing interaction and maintaining order. But Jung warned of a grave danger. If we identify too fully with the persona, we lose touch with the deeper self. We become our role, our script, our mask. The NPC is, in essence, a parody of the persona. It exaggerates the fear that people around us are nothing but masks, automatons repeating lines they did not write. The irony is sharp. We recognize NPC behavior not because others display it, but because we ourselves live dangerously close to it. The meme externalizes a fear that our own lives are scripted, our words echoes, our thoughts repetitions of what the crowd demands. The shadow, what we refuse to see. If the persona is the mask we show the world, the shadow is everything we hide. It contains instincts, impulses, weaknesses, and vulnerabilities we cannot accept as part of ourselves. But the shadow does not vanish simply because we ignore it. It seeks expression, and when we cannot face it directly, we project it onto others. Projection explains much of the NPC meme's power. When we call someone else an NPC, we are often denying our own NPC-like tendencies. We project our fear of conformity onto others so we do not have to confront it in ourselves. By mocking others as mindless, we reassure ourselves that we are free thinkers. But the very act of sharing the meme, repeating the same joke, joining the same chorus of ridicule, reveals the opposite. We, too, are repeating scripts. Jung warned that projection blinds us to reality. Everything that irritates us about others, he wrote, can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. If we feel rage at the NPCs around us, perhaps it is because we cannot bear to see how much of our own lives are scripted. The NPC meme thus functions not only as satire but as shadow play. It allows us to laugh at what we secretly fear within. Historical shadows of conformity. The fear of conformity is ancient. Plato's allegory of the cave depicts prisoners mistaking shadows for reality, repeating what they are shown without thought. Kierkegaard warned that the crowd is untruth, that individuality dissolves in collective repetition. Nietzsche railed against the herd, mocking those who echo morality without questioning it. Each of these warnings points to the same anxiety, that humans, by default, become NPCs if they refuse the hard path of self-awareness. The NPC meme is simply the latest expression of this shadow. Its faceless gray design echoes centuries of images of the crowd. Uniform, mechanical, soulless. It speaks to our suspicion that modern life, dominated by algorithms, slogans, and political polarization, pushes us toward herd existence. Yet, in mocking others, we rarely pause to see the herd in ourselves. The digital amplification of the shadow. The internet intensifies projection. Algorithms feed us content that confirms our worldview, reinforcing scripts we already follow. Communities form around mocking outsiders as NPCs, cementing in-group identity through ridicule. But the irony is glaring. To mock others as conformists while participating in the same meme cycle is itself conformity. This dynamic reveals a painful truth. The more we accuse others of being NPCs, the more likely we are avoiding the NPC within. Jung might say that the meme's very virality proves its archetypal force. It resonates because it activates the universal shadow of conformity, forcing us to confront what we deny. The Stoic counterpoint, self-mastery. The Stoics anticipated this problem. Epictetus warned that blaming others for their blindness is useless if we do not govern our own vision. If you want to improve, he said, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. In other words, do not waste energy mocking the crowd. Instead, focus on your own capacity for independent judgment. Marcus Aurelius echoed this in his Meditations. It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own. The Stoic antidote to NPC projection is radical responsibility. Do not measure your individuality by mocking others. Measure it by your own integrity, your own ability to act according to reason rather than script. Practical reflection. Turning the meme inward. Here lies the opportunity. Instead of using the NPC meme as a weapon of projection, we can use it as a mirror. Each time we feel tempted to call others NPCs, we might ask, where am I repeating scripts without thought? What opinions do I hold because they are truly mine? And what opinions do I echo because they are safe? How much of my day is lived consciously, and how much is automated routine? These are uncomfortable questions, but they lead to growth. Jung called this process integrating the shadow. The Stoics called it self-examination. Both insisted that true freedom lies in facing the truth, not mocking others for avoiding it. Charisma through self-ownership in relationships. This reflection matters deeply. Nothing is less magnetic than a person who repeats cliches or hides behind borrowed scripts. True charisma comes from authenticity, from speaking as oneself rather than as a mouthpiece of the crowd. The Stoics understood this. Charisma is not performance, but presence. When you resist projecting the NPC onto others and instead confront your own scripted habits, you gain something rare, the ability to be real. People are drawn to those who think for themselves, who speak with clarity, who resist the herd. This is how philosophy turns into charisma, not by dazzling but by grounding. The warning of the NPC in the end, the NPC meme is more than ridicule. It is a warning. It tells us that conformity is always a danger, that persona without soul becomes lifeless mask. If we take it only as a joke, we remain trapped in projection. If we take it as a mirror, we can use it to confront our own shadow, to reclaim individuality, to live with awareness. Jung would caution us. The shadow will not disappear simply because you laugh at it. It must be faced. The Stoics would agree. Mocking the blindness of others is easy, but mastery of the self is hard. Together, these traditions point to the deeper meaning of the NPC. It is not about others. It is about us. And so the faceless gray figure stares back at us, its blank eyes a challenge. Are you awake? Or are you scripted? The answer, uncomfortable as it may be, begins not with them, but with you. The archetype of the zombie, society's terror of mindlessness, the NPC meme, with its gray, lifeless face, is not the first time humanity has imagined figures drained of individuality. Across cultures and centuries, we encounter a recurring archetype. The soulless human, the living dead, the puppet moved by unseen strings. Jung would argue that these images all point to the same archetype, society's enduring terror of mindlessness. The ancient fear of the empty soul in mythology, we find countless figures who resemble the NPC. In Jewish folklore, there is the golem, a clay figure animated by magical words, strong but without will, a servant who cannot think for itself. In Greek myth, we find the automaton telos, a bronze giant created to guard Crete, whose movements are mechanical, predictable, unchanging. Even in Homer, the shades in the underworld are described as empty shadows of their former selves, murmuring meaninglessly in darkness. These figures are disturbing not because they are monstrous, but because they are hollow. They remind us of what happens when soul is absent, when consciousness is reduced to repetition. They embody the fear that humans, too, can become empty shells. The modern birth of the zombie in modern culture. This archetype takes perhaps its most famous form in the zombie. Originally rooted in Haitian folklore, the zombie was not the brain-eating monster of Hollywood, but a body enslaved, stripped of will, animated without autonomy. It was a metaphor for dehumanization under slavery and colonialism. When the zombie entered Western pop culture, it transformed into a monster of contagion, hordes of the mindless overwhelming the few who remained awake. The imagery is powerful. The zombie horde represents the nightmare of losing individuality, of becoming absorbed into a faceless mass. Survival stories about zombies are not only about avoiding death, they are about preserving the self against mindless conformity. The NPC meme is, in many ways, a digital shorthand for the same archetype. It shrinks the zombie's horror into a satirical cartoon, but the core remains, the terror of the soulless human. Jung's archetype of the automaton. Jung noted that archetypes often manifest as extreme figures that embody collective anxieties. The automaton, whether zombie, puppet, or NPC, emerges when societies fear loss of agency. In times when culture feels overstructured, when scripts dominate, when people fear they are losing individuality to systems larger than themselves, this archetype surfaces. In the industrial age, it was the factory worker reduced to a cog in the machine. In the 20th century, it was the soldier drilled into obedience. In our digital age, it is the NPC, the person scripted by algorithms, repeating ideological lines, reacting automatically to cues. Each form reflects the same fear, that humans can be hollowed out, turned into mechanisms, robbed of inner life, projection and reassurance. But here is the paradox. While we mock NPCs, we consume zombie stories with fascination. Why? Because they reassure us. They allow us to externalize the fear of mindlessness. We tell ourselves, they are the zombies, they are the NPCs, not us. By watching or mocking them, we distance ourselves from the archetype. Projection provides temporary comfort. Yet Jung would insist that the archetype exists in us all. The potential for mindlessness is not out there in the faceless horde. It is in us, every time we follow habit without thought, every time we echo the crowd without reflection. The archetype disturbs us because it is too close to home. The Stoic battle against the crowd. The Stoics recognized this same danger in their own time. Rome was full of crowds, markets, theaters, games, mobs. Seneca warned that the crowd corrupts, that it pulls individuals into thoughtless behavior. There is no reason why you should fasten the blame on your illness or on the place where you live, he wrote. When you are surrounded by a crowd, you are not safe. For Seneca, the crowd was the ancient version of the zombie horde. Dangerous not because it attacked physically, but because it consumed individuality. Epictetus offered a practical counter. Train your mind to resist imitation. Do not be carried away by the laughter, anger, or panic of the crowd. Stand firm in your own judgments. This is how the Stoic avoids becoming a zombie. By guarding the autonomy of thought, by refusing to repeat lines simply because they are spoken loudly. Charisma as the opposite of mindlessness. Here lies an interesting twist. If the NPC or zombie archetype represents lifeless conformity, then its opposite, the figure of individuality, presence, and authenticity, has magnetic power. This is why charisma feels so rare and powerful. To meet someone who speaks with originality, who is not scripted, who radiates consciousness, is to encounter the antidote to the NPC. Jung would say such a person is on the path of individuation, integrating persona and shadow, becoming a whole self rather than a mask. The Stoics would say such a person is free, governing their own mind instead of being governed. In either case, charisma arises from inner life, not external performance. Against the faceless horde, the self-aware individual shines like fire against ash. Modern rituals of mindlessness look at viral challenges, scripted debates, or social media outrage cycles. Do they not resemble zombie contagion? One person posts, others repeat, soon millions echo the same line, the same dance, the same outrage. The contagion spreads, and individuality dissolves into mass participation. These are not trivial distractions. They are enactments of the archetype of the zombie. Yet even here, awareness changes everything. To join a viral trend consciously is not the same as joining mindlessly. To laugh at a meme with awareness of its archetype is not the same as mocking blindly. Jung's psychology and Stoic philosophy both remind us. The archetype has power, but consciousness gives choice. The warning of the zombie archetype, the zombie, the NPC, the automaton, these are not just figures of ridicule. They are warnings. They show us what happens when we live without reflection, when we surrender individuality to the scripts of culture. They frighten us not because they are alien, but because they are possible futures for ourselves. Jung insisted that confronting the shadow is painful but necessary. The shadow here is our own capacity for mindlessness. To deny it is to remain vulnerable to it. To face it is to gain freedom. The Stoics would frame it as discipline. Train the mind daily, guard against the crowd. Remember that true freedom lies not in external roles but in mastery of the self. The archetype made digital, and so the NPC meme is not just satire. It is the zombie archetype reborn in pixels. It is the automaton fear rendered as humor. It is the collective unconscious reminding us, once again, of the oldest terror, to be alive in body but dead in soul. The faceless gray figure may seem silly, but it carries with it the weight of myth, folklore, philosophy, and psychology. Every time it appears, it whispers the same question. Are you awake? Or are you repeating lines in a script you did not write? The choice, though uncomfortable, is ours. Stoic reframing authenticity as the antidote to NPC thinking. The NPC meme, at its core, expresses a fear that people live mechanically, repeating scripts rather than thinking for themselves. Carl Jung would interpret this as the danger of over-identification with the persona, where the mask of conformity suffocates individuality. But if Jung diagnosed the problem, the Stoics offer a practical antidote. Their philosophy provides tools to resist becoming an NPC, to remain awake, conscious, and authentic in a world that constantly pressures us to drift into scripts. Epictetus and the power of judgment. Epictetus taught that freedom does not come from external circumstances but from mastery of our judgments. Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of things. This insight strikes directly at the heart of NPC thinking. The NPC repeats lines because their judgments are unexamined, They echo what they have been told, what the crowd believes, what feels safe. The Stoic, by contrast, pauses to examine. Is this true? Is this within my control? Does this align with virtue? To live as a Stoic is to resist automatic reaction. When insulted, the NPC repeats outrage. The Stoic chooses whether to be offended. When swept into mass fear, the NPC panics. The Stoic asks, what is within my control and what is not? This pause, this conscious choice, is the dividing line between automation and autonomy. Jung would say that it is the moment where the shadow of conformity is integrated rather than projected. The Stoics would simply call it freedom. Marcus Aurelius and the crowd. Marcus Aurelius, an emperor surrounded by flatterers and mobs, faced daily pressure to conform. Yet in his meditations, he constantly reminded himself to stand apart from the crowd's scripts. The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them know anything about the subject. This is a direct rebuke to NPC thinking, the tendency to equate repetition with truth. For Marcus, truth is not measured by popularity, but by reason. Here lies a practical lesson. Online, popularity often masquerades as truth. The most shared meme, the most viral trend, the loudest outrage. The Stoic must resist this illusion. Virality is not evidence. Consensus is not reason. To follow blindly is to live as an NPC. To pause, reflect, and judge independently is to live as a philosopher. Authenticity as charisma. The NPC meme ridicules lifelessness. But it also reveals what people hunger for: authenticity. In relationships, nothing is more magnetic than someone who speaks with their own voice, who listens deeply, who refuses to reduce themselves to a mask. The Stoics understood this long before the age of memes. Epictetus taught that philosophy should be lived, not merely spoken. The true philosopher radiates calm, clarity, and self-command. This radiance is a kind of charisma, not the artificial charisma of performance, but the quiet force of integrity. Marcus Aurelius was not theatrical, but his calm presence inspired loyalty. Seneca wrote letters that still move readers 2,000 years later because his words carried the authenticity of a man wrestling with his own flaws. In the context of NPC thinking, this means that charisma is not achieved by mocking others as mindless. It is achieved by living mindfully yourself. When you resist scripts, when you speak after reflection rather than reaction, you stand out. People feel drawn to authenticity because it is so rare in a world saturated with mimicry. Practical Stoic exercises against NPC drift. How can one resist becoming an NPC in daily life? The Stoics give us concrete practices. Daily reflection. Marcus Aurelius began and ended his days with self-examination. You can do the same. Each evening, ask yourself, did I act today from reason or from habit? Did I repeat scripts, or did I choose my words consciously? Did I project NPC-hood onto others, or did I face it in myself? Control the input. Seneca warned against corrupting influences. Today, this means curating your digital environment. Ask, which voices am I allowing to script my thoughts? Which memes or trends am I consuming uncritically? Replace noise with wisdom, crowd outrage with reflective voices. Pause before response. Epictetus advised, when something happens, remind yourself, it is not the thing itself that disturbs me, but my judgment about it. Before reacting online or in person, pause. Is this my thought or the crowd's script? Do I want to act, or am I simply echoing? This pause is the difference between autonomy and automation. Practice presence in conversation. NPCs are scripted in dialogue. They do not listen. They repeat. To break this pattern, practice deep listening. Ask questions. Respond thoughtfully. Make others feel seen. In doing so, you move beyond persona into presence, the true ground of charisma. Detach from approval. NPCs crave validation because their identity depends on the crowd. The Stoic, however, seeks only to align with virtue. Marcus wrote, it never ceases to amaze me. We love ourselves more than others, but care more about their opinion than our own. Detach from approval. Speak what you know to be true, even if the crowd mocks. The archetype reframed. Jung would say that the NPC archetype embodies our fear of lifelessness, of losing individuality to the collective unconscious. The Stoics offer a reframing. This fear can be turned into discipline. Each time you encounter the NPC meme, let it remind you not to project, but to reflect. Where am I mechanical? Where can I be more awake? This transformation is subtle but profound. The meme ceases to be ridicule and becomes ritual. It becomes a modern memento mori, not a reminder of death, but of the death in life that comes from unreflective existence. And like the skull on a Stoic philosopher's desk, it reminds us, awaken now. Charisma rooted in calm in relationships. This reframing changes everything. Imagine two people. One repeats memes, slogans, and cliches. The other pauses, reflects, and responds authentically. Which one radiates charisma? Which one do people trust, admire, follow? Charisma is not about brilliance or performance. It is about integrity. It is about living as a whole person rather than a script. Jung called this individuation. The Stoics called it living in accordance with nature and reason. Both point to the same reality. Authenticity is magnetic. The final warning. The NPC meme tempts us to laugh at others. But the deeper lesson is to awaken ourselves. Jung and the Stoics agree. Projection blinds while reflection frees. We become authentic not by mocking conformity in others, but by breaking conformity in ourselves. So when you next see the gray, faceless figure staring back at you from a meme, do not rush to share it as satire. Pause. Ask, am I awake? Or am I repeating lines? If you can answer honestly, if you can live from that awareness, you will discover something rare. Freedom of thought, depth of presence, and a charisma that cannot be faked. That is the true antidote to NPC thinking. Breaking scripts, living consciously in the age of algorithms. The NPC meme is more than satire. It is a mirror reflecting society's deepest fear, that we are drifting into mechanical existence, speaking words we did not write, performing lives we did not choose. Jung interpreted this as the danger of over-identification with the persona, the mask swallowing the self. The Stoics reframed it as a failure of self-command, living as a slave to the crowd rather than master of one's own mind. But what does it mean practically to resist becoming an NPC? How do we break scripts in a world dominated by algorithms designed to program us? The scripts we inherit from birth. We inherit scripts. Family expectations, cultural traditions, political narratives, marketing slogans, religious teachings, workplace etiquette, all shape what we say, think, and do. These scripts are not inherently bad. They help us function in society. But the danger arises when we mistake the script for the self. Jung warned that living entirely in the persona leads to hollowness. The Stoics warned that living for approval leads to slavery. Both point to the same truth. Without reflection, we risk becoming NPCs in the story of our own lives. Algorithms as modern puppeteers in earlier ages, scripts were transmitted through family, religion, and state. Today, algorithms have become the new puppeteers. Social media feeds predict what we will click. News platforms amplify outrage that keeps us hooked. Entertainment companies tailor content to our desires before we know them. The illusion of choice masks the reality of programming. We scroll because the algorithm has learned what makes us scroll. We repeat memes because the algorithm ensures we see them. This is NPC existence in digital form. Not merely conforming to social expectations, but being nudged by invisible systems into predictable loops. Jung would call this the collective unconscious externalized, structured by technology. The Stoics would call it enslavement to externals. Both would insist that freedom begins with awareness. Step 1. Recognize the scripts. The first step to breaking scripts is recognizing them. Jung emphasized the importance of making the unconscious conscious. Marcus Aurelius practiced the same discipline, reminding himself daily of the roles he played, emperor, father, philosopher, but refusing to reduce himself to them. In practice, this means pausing throughout the day to ask, am I acting from choice or from habit? Am I repeating lines, or am I speaking my own words? Even simple moments, repeating a greeting, posting online, reacting to a headline, reveal scripts. By noticing them, you create the possibility of change. Step 2. Rewrite the scripts. The Stoics taught that while we cannot control external events, we can control how we interpret and respond. This means we can rewrite the scripts handed to us. Instead of echoing outrage, we can practice calm. Instead of repeating slogans, we can speak with nuance. Instead of chasing approval, we can pursue virtue. Epictetus advised, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." To break scripts often means to risk ridicule. The NPC repeats what is safe. The awakened individual speaks what is true. This is difficult, but it is the path of authenticity. Step 3. Resist algorithmic programming. The algorithms of our time are not malicious, they are indifferent. Their goal is engagement, not truth, meaning, or virtue. To resist them, we must cultivate digital stoicism. Conscious consumption of information, deliberate use of platforms, refusal to outsource our attention. Practical strategies include curating inputs. Follow fewer accounts, but choose those that elevate rather than degrade. Replace outrage with philosophy, noise with depth. Practicing digital fasting. Take intentional breaks from feeds. Seneca warned against constant distraction, urging time for reflection. Digital fasting is the modern application of his advice. Journaling before posting. Instead of reacting instantly, write privately first. Marcus Aurelius wrote pages of reflection to himself, most never meant for public eyes. Do the same before sharing thoughts online. Each of these resists algorithmic nudging, reclaiming your attention as your own. Step 4. Practice presence in relationships. The NPC archetype mocks lifeless dialogue. How often do we repeat scripts in conversation? "I'm fine. How are you? Crazy weather today." These lines are not harmful, but they lack presence. Relationships deepen when we break scripts. Here the Stoics offer guidance. Epictetus urged students to listen more than they spoke. Marcus practiced humility in conversation, treating every person as a teacher in some respect. To apply this, instead of repeating scripts, ask sincere questions. Instead of filling silence with cliches, allow space for thought. Presence itself becomes charisma. It signals that you are awake, not automated. Step 5. Live as an example. Jung believed that individuation, the process of becoming whole, was not only personal but transformative for society. When one person confronts their shadow and lives authentically, they become a model for others. The Stoics said the same. Seneca urged his students to live so that their character itself could teach more than their words. Breaking scripts is not merely about freeing yourself. It is about becoming an example of freedom in a culture of conformity. Each act of authenticity is contagious in its own way. Just as memes spread unconsciously, authenticity spreads consciously. Charisma through integrity. Charisma is often misunderstood as performance. But the deepest charisma comes from integrity, the alignment of words, actions, and inner life. When you break scripts, when you live consciously, people notice. They may not always agree, but they feel the difference. The calm presence of someone who refuses to be programmed, who listens deeply, who speaks authentically, is magnetic. Marcus Aurelius never sought charisma, yet his meditations have captivated readers for centuries. Jung never sought popularity, yet his ideas continue to shape psychology and culture. Their charisma came not from performance but from presence, not from spectacle but from substance. This is the opposite of NPC existence. The daily struggle. Breaking scripts is not a one-time achievement. It is a daily struggle. Jung warned that the unconscious never disappears. It must be faced again and again. The Stoics practiced daily exercises because they knew the pull of the crowd is constant. Every day we are tempted to drift back into automation, to scroll without thinking, to repeat without reflection, to react without pause. Every day we face the choice, to live as a mask or to live as a self. The final reflection. The NPC meme may have begun as a joke, but it points to a serious truth. Mindlessness is not rare, it is the default. Consciousness is the exception. To live consciously is to swim against the current, to resist the scripts of culture, to break the programming of algorithms. It is difficult, but it is also the only path to freedom. Jung would remind us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The Stoics would echo, fate is not in our control, but our response is. Between these two truths lies a way of life. Aware, reflective, awake. The faceless NPC stares at us from the screen, its blank eyes a warning. Do not live as a script. Do not confuse the mask for the self. Do not outsource your soul to algorithms. Break the loop. Live awake. The rise of TikTok dance trends. Billions moving in unison. Open your phone, scroll through TikTok, and you will see it. The same song, the same choreography, repeated by millions. A teenager in Los Angeles performs it in a bedroom. A mother in Manila records it with her children. A soldier in uniform performs it between duties. Celebrities, influencers, and ordinary people, each reproducing the same sequence of movements, smiling, sinking, joining a wave that spans the globe. At first glance, it looks like harmless entertainment. Just dance, just fun, just another way to pass time online. But Carl Jung would not dismiss it so quickly. He would ask, why does this happen? Why do billions of people repeat the same movements, synchronized across cultures, languages, and backgrounds? What hidden need drives such mass imitation? For Jung, this phenomenon points directly to the archetype of ritual. Human beings across history have danced together. From tribal ceremonies to military drills, from seasonal festivals to religious worship, collective movement has been central to human culture. Dance is not only art, it is psychology. It aligns the individual with the group, fuses bodies into rhythm, dissolves the boundary between self and other. It is one of the oldest ways humans access the collective unconscious. Dance as ancient symbol in ancient cultures. Dance was rarely mere entertainment. It was symbolic. Tribes danced to honor gods, to mark harvests, to prepare for war, to mourn the dead. Each movement carried meaning, connecting the dancer to forces larger than themselves. Even in Greece, where theater developed, dance was inseparable from ritual. The chorus moved as one, echoing the mythic patterns of tragedy and comedy. TikTok dance trends, stripped of sacred meaning, still activate the same psychological mechanism. The choreography is simple, repeatable, designed for replication. The song becomes the chant, the rhythm becomes the heartbeat, the body becomes part of something larger. For the participant, there is pleasure in belonging, in losing oneself in movement that others across the world are performing simultaneously. The archetype of synchrony. Jung might say that TikTok dances express the archetype of synchrony, the longing to move as one. Synchrony is powerful. In rituals, it created cohesion. In armies, it forged discipline. In sports, it produces flow. Psychologists today find that synchronized movement, walking in step, singing in chorus, dancing together, increases trust and cooperation. The archetype remains potent even when stripped of explicit meaning. The success of TikTok dances reveals how hungry modern people are for synchrony. In an age of isolation and fragmentation, where individuality is emphasized but loneliness is rampant, the chance to join a global rhythm is irresistible. Jung would not see this as trivial. He would see it as a symbol of the collective unconscious expressing its desire for unity through ritual motion. The shadow of ritual without meaning. Yet Jung would also warn of the shadow. In traditional rituals, synchrony was embedded in stories, myths, and values. The dance connected people to gods, ancestors, or ideals. On TikTok, synchrony is detached from meaning. The movements are empty forms, repeated endlessly without reference to anything beyond entertainment. The risk is ritual without sacredness. The body goes through motions, but the soul remains untouched. This can lead to addiction. The pleasure of belonging, of joining the wave, can become compulsive. Each new dance offers a momentary sense of connection, but without depth, it vanishes quickly, demanding the next trend. Jung would call this the danger of archetypes unanchored, powerful forces of the unconscious expressed without guidance, leaving people vulnerable to repetition without transformation. Historical echoes. If this sounds exaggerated, consider history. The dancing plagues of medieval Europe saw crowds of people dance uncontrollably for days, sometimes until collapse. Historians debate the causes: mass hysteria, ergot poisoning, social stress, but Jung would interpret it as the eruption of ritual energy without containment. Similarly, in Dionysian festivals of ancient Greece, participants danced ecstatically, dissolving boundaries of self. These events were sacred, but they also carried danger, blurring into chaos. TikTok dance trends may not be as extreme, but they echo the same archetype. The collective unconscious seeks synchrony, and in the absence of sacred frames, it finds outlet in the digital stage. Billions moving together, not around a fire, not in a temple, but in glowing rectangles across the globe. The Stoic view. Choosing rituals consciously. How would the Stoics view this? They would not dismiss dance itself. It is natural for humans to seek rhythm and community. But they would caution against unconscious imitation. Epictetus insisted that freedom lies in choosing one's actions deliberately, not being swept by the crowd. Marcus Aurelius urged himself daily to remain anchored in reason, even when surrounded by mass emotion. Applied here, the Stoic response is to ask, why am I participating in this dance? Do I choose it, or am I following unconsciously? Is this movement aligned with my values, or is it mere repetition? Rituals can be uplifting when chosen with awareness. They become dangerous when followed blindly. Charisma through rhythm. There is also a lesson for relationships and charisma. Synchrony is magnetic. People are drawn to those who move with rhythm, whether in speech, body language, or emotional presence. TikTok dances reveal how powerful rhythm remains, even in trivial form. But in real life, charisma grows not from copying the crowd, but from mastering rhythm in authentic ways. The Stoics practiced this by aligning themselves with the rhythm of nature. They sought harmony between their actions and reason, between their lives and the larger order of the cosmos. This harmony radiates presence. A person in rhythm with themselves and with reality exudes charisma more powerful than any viral choreography. The lesson of the dance. The rise of TikTok dance trends is not meaningless. It shows that humans remain ritual beings, hungry for synchrony, drawn to collective movement. Jung would remind us that archetypes never disappear, they only change form. The ritual dance of the tribe becomes the viral dance of the feed. The archetype of synchrony continues to shape our lives, even when stripped of sacredness. The challenge is to engage consciously, to recognize the archetype, to enjoy rhythm without being consumed by it, to choose rituals that align with depth rather than drift into endless repetition. Jung would call this integration of the archetype. The Stoics would call it living in accordance with nature and reason. In either case, the message is clear. Do not dismiss the dance as trivial and do not join it blindly. See it for what it is, a modern ritual, a symbol of the unconscious seeking connection. And then ask, how will I dance? Consciously or mechanically? With presence or as an NPC in motion? Jung's archetype of ritual and initiation. From tribal dances to viral synchrony. Carl Jung believed that archetypes are timeless patterns of human behavior. They emerge in myths, in symbols, and in collective practices. Among the most enduring is the archetype of ritual and initiation. The instinct to move, sing, or act in unison, binding the individual into something larger than themselves. To Jung, ritual was never about the surface action. It was about the deeper psychic transformation it represented. When we watch billions repeat TikTok dances, it may look like trivial entertainment. But Jung would see echoes of the same archetype that animated tribal dances, religious festivals, and rites of passage for millennia. Ritual is not dead. It has migrated to a new stage. Ritual in tribal societies, in tribal communities, dance was inseparable from survival. Hunters mimicked the chase through movement before setting out, believing that ritual action aligned them with the forces of nature. Seasonal dances honored fertility, rain, or harvest, binding the community to the cycles of the earth. In many African traditions, initiation rituals used dance to mark the passage from childhood to adulthood, the individual dissolving into rhythm before emerging with a new identity. These rituals had structure. The repetition of steps, the rhythm of drums, the collective synchrony, all carried symbolic weight. They taught values, reinforced identity, and connected participants to archetypes larger than themselves. To Jung, such rituals revealed the collective unconscious made visible, guiding individuals through life's great transitions. Greek and Roman festivals, the archetype of ritual persisted in the ancient Mediterranean. Dionysian festivals in Greece involved ecstatic dancing and music, dissolving individuality into collective frenzy. These were not merely parties. They were encounters with the archetype of chaos and rebirth. Participants left behind ordinary identity, touched the divine, and returned changed. In Rome, Saturnalia inverted order through games, music, and communal revelry. These rituals were not random. They reflected the archetype of renewal, temporarily dissolving hierarchy to remind society of its fragility. Even military drills, where soldiers marched in unison, reflected ritual synchrony, transforming individuals into a cohesive body. Ritual as psychological technology. For Jung, rituals served as psychological technology. They guided the individual through transitions, connected them to the unconscious, and provided meaning. Without ritual, he warned, individuals risked being cut off from the deeper currents of psyche. TikTok dances, though stripped of myth, function in a similar way. They provide structure, repetition, and synchrony. They give participants a sense of belonging and a temporary identity as part of a global movement. The ritual is shallow, but the archetype it expresses is profound. Initiation without depth. Here lies the shadow. Traditional rituals guided participants toward transformation. They were embedded in myth and meaning, often overseen by elders who interpreted their significance. A young person danced not just for fun, but to enter adulthood, to connect with ancestors, to embody archetypes of courage or fertility. TikTok dances replicate the form without the depth. Billions participate, but no elder interprets, no myth anchors, no transformation follows. It is initiation without initiation, movement without meaning. Jung would call this dangerous because archetypes are powerful forces. When they erupt without guidance, they can addict, overwhelm, or exhaust rather than heal. The hunger for belonging. Yet the popularity of these dances shows that the archetype of ritual remains alive. People hunger for synchrony, for belonging, for collective rhythm. In a fragmented world where individuality is prized but loneliness is epidemic, viral dances provide a taste of community. They are reminders that we are ritual beings, even when our rituals are digital and shallow. This hunger is not trivial. It points to a cultural vacuum. Without meaningful rituals, people turn to substitutes. Jung warned that when archetypal needs are unmet, they express themselves in distorted ways. TikTok dances may be harmless, but they also reveal a deeper lack: the absence of rituals that connect people to values, meaning, and purpose. The Stoic perspective. Choosing rituals wisely. The Stoics would not oppose ritual outright. They recognized the human need for structure and rhythm. Marcus Aurelius followed daily rituals of reflection and writing, aligning his mind each morning and evening. Epictetus recommended rehearsing hardships as ritual practice, strengthening the will against adversity. But the Stoics insisted that rituals be chosen consciously. They warned against empty repetition. Seneca criticized Romans who performed elaborate festivals without understanding, calling it distraction rather than philosophy. For the Stoic, ritual must align with reason, virtue, and self-command. Applied to TikTok dances, the Stoic lesson is clear: participate if you choose, but do so with awareness. Recognize the archetype at play, the hunger for synchrony, and decide whether this ritual serves you. Do not confuse empty repetition with meaning. Choose rituals that elevate, not those that merely distract. Charisma through deliberate ritual. Ritual is also central to charisma. Leaders throughout history have used synchrony, through ceremonies, parades, or repeated phrases, to bind followers. But charisma built on empty ritual fades quickly. The Stoic approach to charisma is subtler. It is about aligning your personal rituals with authenticity. For example, Marcus Aurelius practiced the ritual of beginning each day by imagining challenges he would face, rude people, betrayals, hardships, and preparing to meet them calmly. This ritual gave him presence, steadiness, and quiet charisma. In relationships, your rituals of listening, reflection, and attention can create the same effect. True charisma is the result of rituals consciously chosen, not unconsciously copied. A culture of shallow rituals. The popularity of TikTok dances reveals a paradox. We live in a culture that dismisses ritual as outdated, yet we cannot escape the archetype. We perform rituals constantly: birthday parties, national anthems, morning routines, online trends. The danger is not ritual itself, but the shallowness of rituals detached from meaning. Jung would argue that this leaves the psyche unfulfilled. Ritual energy, deprived of depth, dissipates into endless repetition. The unconscious keeps demanding synchrony, but without myth, the ritual becomes noise. The result is a culture where billions move together but feel emptier afterward. The deeper question, then, is not whether TikTok dances matter, but what they reveal. They show us that the archetype of ritual and initiation is alive. They show us that people still crave synchrony, still long to belong. They also show us that without meaningful guidance, ritual collapses into shallow entertainment. The challenge is to recognize this and respond. Jung would urge us to restore depth to our rituals, to connect movement with meaning. The Stoics would urge us to choose rituals aligned with virtue and reason. Both traditions warn against unconscious imitation. Both invite us to live deliberately. The archetype endures. The archetype of ritual has survived for millennia because it answers something fundamental in the human soul. We are not purely individuals. We are beings who need synchrony, rhythm, belonging. Viral dances, however trivial, remind us of this truth. They are modern echoes of ancient fires, new costumes for timeless archetypes. The question is not whether we will dance, but how. Will we dance blindly, repeating without reflection, or will we choose rituals that transform, uplift, and connect us to meaning? Jung and the Stoics offer the same answer: awareness. See the archetype, choose consciously, and let ritual serve your growth rather than enslave you. The shadow side of TikTok dances: obsession, addiction, and the loss of individuality. Every archetype has two sides. Jung emphasized that symbols are never purely light or purely dark. They contain opposites: growth and danger, creation and destruction. Rituals are no exception. They can unite a community, give life structure, and connect people to meaning. But when ritual loses depth, when it becomes repetition without awareness, it risks turning destructive. In the case of TikTok dance trends, what seems harmless can carry a shadow: obsession, addiction, and the erosion of individuality. The pleasure of synchrony, the danger of compulsion. Psychologists have shown that synchrony creates pleasure. Dancing together, moving in rhythm, singing in unison, all release chemicals like oxytocin and dopamine, creating trust and bonding. This is why collective movement feels good, why TikTok dances spread so easily. The body rewards synchrony with a sense of connection. But what happens when this pleasure is detached from meaning? The ritual becomes compulsive. People chase the next trend not for transformation, but for the fleeting dopamine hit of participation. Instead of building identity, the dance erodes it, reducing individuals to interchangeable performers of the same steps. The archetype of ritual, Jung would warn, becomes hollow, addictive, consuming energy without giving depth. Addiction to virality. The structure of TikTok amplifies this shadow. The algorithm rewards replication. The more a dance is repeated, the more it spreads. This creates a feedback loop. Users copy dances to gain views, likes, and validation. The ritual becomes less about joy and more about performance. It is no longer "I dance because I want to," but "I dance because the algorithm demands it." Jung might interpret this as ritual captured by the persona. The individual performs not to connect with the unconscious, but to maintain a mask, the mask of being trendy, relevant, visible. The ritual becomes another script, another performance that conceals rather than reveals. The Stoics would see this as enslavement. Epictetus warned that chasing approval, whether applause in the forum or likes online, enslaves the soul. If you wish to be a writer, write, he said. If you wish to be a philosopher, practice philosophy. The Stoic path is to act according to principle, not applause. Viral dances, when driven by the hunger for validation, invert this wisdom. They create dependence on external approval, chaining identity to numbers on a screen. The loss of individuality. Jung's concern would not only be addiction but loss of individuality. Ritual in tribal or religious contexts balanced the group with meaning. It dissolved individuality temporarily but restored it with renewed purpose. TikTok dances, by contrast, dissolve individuality without restoration. The person merges into the global wave but gains no deeper identity in return. This explains why viral participation often leaves people feeling emptier afterward. The ritual satisfies the unconscious hunger for synchrony but does not nourish the soul with meaning. The result is repetition without growth, belonging without depth. Individuation, the process of becoming a whole self, is stalled. Nietzsche foresaw this danger in his critique of the herd. He warned that when individuals seek safety in imitation, they avoid the risk of selfhood. They gain comfort but lose vitality. The NPC meme and the TikTok dance trend are two sides of the same archetype. Fear of conformity expressed as ridicule, and conformity itself expressed as ritual. Both reveal the shadow of individuality eroded by the crowd. The archetype of the puppet in mythology, the shadow of ritual, often appears as the archetype of the puppet. Figures controlled by strings, enchanted by spells, moved by unseen hands. These stories are warnings about surrendering agency. Jung would say the puppet is the shadow of ritual, the moment when collective synchrony becomes collective control. On TikTok, the puppet archetype emerges in subtle ways. The algorithm pulls the strings. The user dances without realizing why. The movements are not their own but prescripted, repeated endlessly, consumed by millions who will never remember the individual who performed them. The dancer becomes a puppet of virality. Stoic discipline against addiction. How do we resist this shadow? The Stoics provide a practical answer. Discipline. Epictetus insisted that freedom begins by distinguishing what is in our control from what is not. The number of likes, the spread of a trend, these are not in our control. What is in our control is why we act. Seneca warned against wasting life in distractions. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. To apply this, before joining a viral dance, ask, why am I doing this? For joy? For connection? Or for empty approval? If it is the latter, the Stoic would say, stop. Reclaim your time. Act for virtue, not vanity. Marcus Aurelius practiced rituals, but his were rituals of reflection. Writing in his journal each morning, preparing his mind for challenges. These were not addictive, but grounding. He chose rituals that built depth rather than eroded it. This is the Stoic model. Ritual aligned with self-command, not obsession. Charisma through resistance in relationships. The shadow of ritual manifests as inauthenticity. When everyone copies the same movements, individuality dissolves. Charisma suffers because charisma depends on authenticity. To stand out, one must resist unconscious imitation. The Stoic path here is paradoxical. By refusing to follow every trend, by cultivating steadiness, by speaking and acting from one's own center, a person becomes more magnetic. Others sense the difference. Jung would say this is individuation radiating outward. The Stoics would call it living in accordance with nature. Either way, charisma grows when one resists the shadow of ritual. Awareness as antidote. The archetype of ritual cannot be suppressed. Humans will always seek synchrony. The question is whether we participate consciously or unconsciously. The shadow emerges when we drift, addicted to repetition, enslaved by approval, eroded in individuality. The light emerges when we choose rituals deliberately, aligning them with meaning, values, and growth. Jung insisted that confronting the shadow is the path to wholeness. The Stoics insisted that self-command is the path to freedom. Together, they offer a way to engage with viral rituals without being consumed by them. The final reflection: TikTok dances are not just fun. They are modern rituals, expressions of an ancient archetype. But they also carry a shadow: obsession, addiction, loss of self. To ignore this is to risk becoming puppets of algorithms, repeating without awareness, merging into the crowd without depth. The choice is not whether we will participate in ritual. Ritual is inevitable. The choice is whether we will do so consciously. Will we let archetypes enslave us, or will we integrate them into a life of meaning? Jung and the Stoics give us the same answer: awareness, discipline, authenticity. In a world of endless repetition, the most radical act is to live as yourself. Stoic wisdom, ritual as discipline. Choosing which dances to follow, the Stoics were not opposed to ritual. They understood that human beings are creatures of rhythm and repetition, that the structure of daily life shapes the mind. What they rejected was blind ritual. Actions performed without understanding, ceremonies followed without reflection. For the Stoics, rituals were tools, not chains. They could strengthen discipline, deepen character, and align one's life with virtue. But they could just as easily enslave if practiced unconsciously. When we look at TikTok dances through this lens, we see not just entertainment but ritual in its rawest form. Repeated gestures, synchronized movement, billions participating. The question is not whether ritual is happening, the question is whether it is being chosen deliberately or drifted into unconsciously. The Stoics, always practical, would urge us to pause, reflect, and decide which dances are worth joining. Seneca on ritual and distraction. Seneca often criticized Romans who treated festivals as opportunities for distraction rather than growth. He saw people spending days in shallow pleasures, repeating ceremonies without understanding, and warned that they were wasting their lives. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it, he wrote. Ritual without awareness was, to him, a form of wasted time. If Seneca were alive today, he would likely see TikTok dances as digital saturnalia, moments of collective revelry that risk dissolving into emptiness. He would not condemn dancing outright, but he would ask, what is it giving you? Are you practicing discipline, presence, and joy? Or are you merely distracting yourself, eroding your individuality in endless repetition? Marcus Aurelius and the ritual of reflection. Marcus Aurelius approached ritual differently. For him, ritual was not about public performance but private discipline. Each morning, he began with reflection, reminding himself of the challenges he would face: selfishness, ingratitude, betrayal, and preparing his mind to meet them calmly. Each evening, he reviewed his day, examining where he acted with virtue and where he fell short. These were rituals as much as any dance, but they were chosen deliberately, aligned with his values, and aimed at strengthening his character. Imagine if we approached digital rituals in the same way. Instead of copying dances unconsciously, we might ask, what rituals online help me grow? What actions align with my deeper values? Ritual need not be abandoned. It must be reframed. Epictetus and the discipline of choice. Epictetus was clear. Freedom begins with the recognition of choice. We cannot control external events, but we can control our response. This applies as much to rituals as to anything else. When you are delighted with anything, be delighted as with something that is not your own, he said. In other words, participate lightly without attachment. Do not let ritual control you. For TikTok dances, this means enjoying them if you choose, but not binding your identity to them. Perform the dance with joy, but do not measure your worth by views or likes. Ritual becomes destructive when it becomes identity. The Stoic path is to keep rituals in their proper place. Tools, not masters. Choosing rituals in relationships. Rituals also shape relationships. Every friendship, every romance, every family bond has its rituals. Greetings, meals, shared jokes, repeated habits. These can deepen intimacy, but they can also decay into lifeless repetition. The NPC archetype reappears here. People speak in scripts, act without presence, and relationships lose vitality. The Stoic solution is simple but demanding. Choose rituals that express care, presence, and authenticity. Instead of repeating lifeless scripts, cultivate meaningful habits. Write letters. Share gratitude. Listen deeply. Ritual then becomes not a prison but a bond. It strengthens relationships through conscious repetition, not hollow mimicry. Charisma through conscious ritual. Charisma often emerges from ritual. Leaders repeat phrases, gestures, or patterns that resonate with their followers. But charisma rooted in empty ritual fades quickly. The Stoic form of charisma is different. It grows from consistency, from rituals of self-discipline that radiate steadiness. For example, Marcus Aurelius' daily reflections gave him a calm presence that inspired trust. Seneca's habit of writing letters to friends cultivated bonds that still move readers centuries later. These were not rituals for spectacle but rituals for substance. Applied today, charisma grows not from copying viral movements, but from cultivating personal rituals of authenticity. The balance between freedom and ritual. Jung would agree with the Stoics on this point. He believed archetypes demand expression, but warned that when left unconscious, they consume us. Ritual is necessary, but it must be chosen. The collective unconscious seeks synchrony, and if we do not channel it meaningfully, it finds shallow outlets, like endless dances repeated without depth. The Stoics add a crucial guardrail: reason. Ritual must be filtered through reason and aligned with virtue. Dance if it uplifts you. Sing if it strengthens bonds. Participate if it brings joy. But never allow ritual to erode your freedom. Practical Stoic applications to apply Stoic wisdom to modern rituals like TikTok dances. Consider these practices. Daily audit of rituals at the end of each day. List the rituals you performed, online and offline. Which were chosen deliberately, which were unconscious, which served your growth and which drained it. This reflection transforms ritual into discipline. Anchor rituals in values before joining a trend. Ask, does this align with my values? Am I doing this for joy, for connection, or simply for approval? If the latter, abstain. If the former, engage consciously. Replace empty rituals with meaningful ones. If you crave synchrony, replace shallow repetition with deeper practices. Join a community that sings, dances, or meditates with purpose. The archetype of ritual demands expression. Give it healthier outlets. Cultivate rituals of presence in relationships instead of scripted interactions. Create rituals that deepen bonds. A nightly walk, a shared moment of gratitude, a weekly reflection with a friend. These rituals build intimacy rather than erode it. Guard against addiction to approval. Ritual becomes slavery when tied to external validation. The Stoic guards against this by detaching worth from applause. Perform rituals for their intrinsic value, not for the numbers they produce. The dance we choose. Ultimately, the question is not whether we will participate in ritual. We cannot escape it. The human psyche demands it. The question is which rituals we will choose, and whether we will practice them consciously. Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius remind us that rituals can either enslave or liberate. They can chain us to the crowd, or they can discipline us into freedom. The difference lies in awareness and choice. In the age of TikTok, this wisdom is more urgent than ever. Billions dance, often without asking why. The archetype of ritual is alive, but untethered. Jung would warn that without meaning, it risks consuming us. The Stoics would urge us to reclaim it, to anchor ritual in virtue, to choose deliberately. So the next time you see a viral dance, do not dismiss it as trivial. Recognize it as ritual. Ask yourself, will I join this? If so, why? And if not, what rituals will I cultivate instead? For in the end, life itself is ritual. The only question is whether we perform it consciously, as free individuals, or unconsciously, as NPCs in motion. Charisma through rhythm and presence. Why synchrony influences others. When Jung spoke of archetypes, he described them as patterns that transcend time, manifesting in both myth and daily life. The archetype of ritual, expressed today through TikTok dances, carries with it not only the shadow of conformity, but also the possibility of power. For synchrony, the act of moving in rhythm with others has always shaped human influence. It binds groups, inspires loyalty, and generates charisma. To understand charisma deeply, we must look at rhythm not as performance but as presence. Synchrony as social glue. Modern psychology confirms what ancient rituals intuited. When people move together, they bond. Experiments show that even small acts of synchrony, tapping fingers in unison, walking in step, singing the same notes, create trust and cooperation. Soldiers march together not only for discipline but to forge unity. Choirs feel connected not only through music but through breath. Even a handshake or hug establishes a rhythm of synchrony, a micro-ritual of belonging. TikTok dances, for all their triviality, demonstrate this principle at scale. Billions participate not because the steps are extraordinary but because they are shared. To be in rhythm with others, even strangers, satisfies a deep unconscious hunger. Jung would interpret this as the archetype of ritual expressing itself in the digital unconscious. But synchrony does more than bond, it influences. Those who can establish rhythm with others often become leaders, whether consciously or unconsciously. This is where charisma emerges. Charisma as rhythm. Embodied charisma has long been misunderstood as a mysterious gift. But beneath the surface, much of charisma is rhythm. A charismatic speaker matches the cadence of their audience, then subtly shifts it. A charismatic friend listens with patience, then responds with timing that makes others feel seen. A charismatic leader synchronizes with the group's emotions, then directs them toward purpose. Jung might describe charisma as archetypal resonance, the leader embodying a figure that channels collective energy. The Stoics would describe it as self-mastery radiating outward. Both perspectives highlight that charisma is not trickery, but presence in rhythm with others. The risk of shallow synchrony. TikTok dances reveal both sides of this power. On one hand, synchrony is exhilarating. On the other, it can become shallow mimicry. Jung would warn that charisma without authenticity collapses into manipulation. Synchrony without meaning enslaves rather than liberates. This is why leaders who rely on spectacle alone fade quickly, while those grounded in depth endure. The ritual of synchrony must be tethered to values. Without that anchor, charisma becomes hollow performance, no different from a viral trend that fades within days. The Stoic model of charisma. The Stoics provide a model of charisma that transcends performance. For them, true influence came from integrity, presence, and alignment with reason. Marcus Aurelius, though emperor, sought not to dazzle but to embody calm. His charisma was quiet, steady, rooted in discipline. People followed him not because he performed, but because he radiated presence. Seneca, writing to friends, practiced the ritual of honest reflection. His charisma survives not in grand speeches but in letters that reveal vulnerability and depth. Epictetus, once a slave, inspired loyalty through his steadiness and clarity, not through spectacle. What united them was rhythm, not of dance, but of life. They aligned daily rituals with values, creating consistency. This rhythm radiated outward, drawing others into synchrony not through shallow imitation but through respect and trust. Practical steps. Mastering rhythm and presence. How can we apply these lessons today? In relationships, careers, or everyday interactions. Listen for rhythm in conversation when someone speaks. Notice their pace, tone, and pauses. Align with them briefly, then introduce your own rhythm. This subtle synchrony creates trust, then influence. It is conversational charisma, rooted in presence rather than performance. Create rituals of attention in relationships. Establish small rituals that signal presence. Greeting sincerely, maintaining eye contact, asking thoughtful questions. These are microsynchronies, aligning you with the other person's inner rhythm. They show authenticity, which is magnetic. Practice rhythmic discipline. Charisma is built on steadiness. Create daily rituals that align you with your values. Journaling, reflection, meditation, or intentional silence. This rhythm of discipline radiates outward. Others sense when someone lives with coherence, and they are drawn to it. Use group synchrony consciously when leading a group, whether in conversation, a project, or even casual settings. Find moments of synchrony. A shared laugh, a repeated phrase, a coordinated gesture. These create subtle bonds, but anchor them in authenticity, not manipulation. Detached from applause, NPCs crave approval. Stoics resist it. To maintain charisma, detach from the need for constant validation. Speak and act from principle. Synchrony without self-command collapses into conformity. Synchrony with self-command becomes leadership. The archetypal power of the dance. From tribal ceremonies to TikTok dances, humans have always sought synchrony. The archetype of ritual binds us. But the lesson is not simply that synchrony is powerful. It is that synchrony must be chosen, guided, and integrated. Otherwise, it becomes empty repetition. Jung would say that ritual synchrony can either deepen the self or dissolve it. The Stoics would say it can either discipline the soul or enslave it. The deciding factor is awareness. Charisma as the integration of rhythm and authenticity. When you integrate rhythm with authenticity, you achieve charisma. People are drawn to those who can be in sync without losing themselves, who can move with others without dissolving into the crowd. This is what Jung called individuation, the ability to participate in the collective without being consumed by it. The Stoics described it as living in accordance with nature, harmonizing with the world while remaining anchored in reason. Charisma, then, is not magic. It is the natural magnetism of someone who has mastered rhythm without surrendering to it, who participates in ritual but remains whole. The final dance. As section 3 closes, we see TikTok dances for what they are. Not trivial distractions, but modern rituals expressing the archetype of synchrony. They reveal our hunger for belonging, our risk of addiction, our loss of individuality, and our potential for charisma. The dances themselves will fade, as all trends do, but the archetype will not. Ritual will remain. Synchrony will remain. The question is how we engage with it. Will we dance unconsciously, chasing approval, eroding individuality? Or will we dance consciously, choosing rituals that align with values, cultivating presence, radiating charisma? The answer decides whether we live as performers in someone else's script, or as individuals who lead, inspire, and live awake. The rise of doom posting, humor at the edge of collapse. Scroll through online forums, Twitter feeds, or meme pages, and you will notice a recurring theme: despair dressed as humor. Cartoons of tired young men smoking under flickering neon signs. Jokes about economic collapse, climate catastrophe, or political dysfunction framed in absurd irony. Images of skeletons at desks, frogs drowning in energy drinks, captions that read, "Everything is falling apart," followed by a laugh track of emojis. This is doom posting, the practice of turning hopelessness into content, despair into memes. At first glance, doom posting looks like nothing more than dark humor. People laugh at what scares them. They share jokes about the future being ruined, jobs being pointless, the planet being doomed. But Carl Jung would look deeper. He would say, these are not simply jokes. They are expressions of the collective unconscious, symbols of despair emerging because society cannot speak them directly. Doom posting is not entertainment. It is the cultural shadow revealing itself in digital form. The archetype of collapse. Every civilization has carried myths of collapse. The flood that wipes away the world. The apocalypse that burns it down. The empire that decays into dust. Jung argued that such myths are archetypal. They express the fear that beneath all order lies fragility, that beneath civilization lurks chaos. Collapse myths remind us that what we build is temporary. Doom posting is the modern echo of these myths. Instead of prophets warning of divine judgment, we have memes of frogs, skeletons, and tired men warning of debt, burnout, and ecological ruin. The archetype is the same: the collapse of order, the end of stability, the return of chaos. Only the costume has changed. The function of irony. Why do people laugh at collapse? Jung would answer, because the shadow must be faced somehow. If despair cannot be spoken openly, it disguises itself as humor. Laughter provides distance, making unbearable truths tolerable. This is why memes about climate catastrophe, political corruption, or economic hopelessness spread so widely. People may not know how to fix these problems, but they can share a joke about them. Irony becomes a survival mechanism. But irony also carries danger. Jung warned that when the shadow is trivialized, it is not confronted. By laughing at despair, we risk dismissing it rather than addressing it. The archetype of collapse is not harmless. It demands recognition. Ignoring it or laughing it away does not make it vanish. It festers in the unconscious, influencing behavior without our awareness. Historical parallels history gives us many examples of collapse humor. In the late Roman Empire, satire and jokes about decadence circulated even as the empire decayed. In Weimar Germany of the 1920s, cabarets overflowed with black humor about poverty, inflation, and corruption. During the World Wars, soldiers created grim cartoons mocking death itself. In each case, humor provided relief, but it also revealed the despair of the age. Doom posting continues this tradition. It is the cabaret of our time, performed not on stages but on screens. It tells us what statistics and headlines often fail to capture: the emotional reality of living in a world that feels unstable. Jung's wounded healer. Jung identified the archetype of the wounded healer, those who, by confronting their own wounds, can help others. Doom posting in its healthiest form might serve this role. By admitting despair, even ironically, people find solidarity. They realize they are not alone. The wound is shared. Humor becomes a form of collective therapy. But without reflection, doom posting can trap people in paralysis. Instead of healing, the wound becomes identity. People begin to define themselves by despair, wearing cynicism as armor. The shadow consumes the self rather than being integrated. Jung would call this being possessed by the archetype. The Stoic contrast. Facing collapse without despair, the Stoics lived in times of plague, war, and political corruption. They too knew collapse. Marcus Aurelius ruled during plagues that killed millions. Seneca lived under the tyranny of Nero. Epictetus lived as a slave before teaching philosophy. Yet their response to collapse differed from doom posting. Instead of laughing at despair, they confronted it with discipline. Marcus wrote, "Do not act as if you were going to live 10,000 years. Death hangs over you. While you live, while it is in your power, be good." For him, collapse was not entertainment. It was a call to live virtuously. Seneca reminded himself daily that disaster was inevitable, but that character remained within his control. Epictetus insisted that freedom lay in mastering one's judgments, even if the world outside fell apart. The Stoic lesson is clear. Collapse is real, but despair is optional. The archetype of collapse cannot be erased, but it can be faced with courage rather than cynicism. Charisma at the edge of collapse. There is also a lesson here for relationships and influence. Doom posting often masks vulnerability with irony. But charisma grows when people are willing to face despair honestly and still remain steady. A leader who admits the difficulty of the times yet radiates calm becomes magnetic. In relationships, a friend who listens without dismissing despair, who acknowledges fears without mocking them, becomes a source of trust. This is not false optimism. The Stoics did not promise happy endings. They promised resilience. True charisma comes from embodying that resilience, acknowledging collapse but not surrendering to it. Awareness as liberation. To Jung, doom posting is valuable if it leads to awareness. If we can see in these memes the archetype of collapse, we can reflect. Why does this resonate? What shadow does it reveal in me? Am I laughing at despair to avoid feeling it? Or am I using humor to confront it? The Stoics would frame it differently. What is within my control here? The meme reminds me of chaos, but how can I live virtuously today, regardless? By combining Jungian awareness with Stoic discipline, doom posting can be transformed from passive despair into active reflection. The final note: the rise of doom posting shows that beneath our feeds lies a collective anxiety. We fear collapse of systems, of futures, of meaning. We laugh at it because we cannot bear to face it directly. But laughter is not enough. Jung would urge us to listen to these symbols, to confront the shadow they reveal. The Stoics would urge us to discipline ourselves, to face collapse without surrender. The memes may be funny, but they carry a message. We are afraid. The challenge is what we do with that fear. Will we laugh until it consumes us? Or will we confront it and live consciously, even at the edge of collapse? The rise of doom posting humor at the edge of collapse. Scroll through online forums, Twitter feeds, or meme pages, and you will notice a recurring theme: despair dressed as humor. Cartoons of tired young men smoking under flickering neon signs. Jokes about economic collapse, climate catastrophe, or political dysfunction framed in absurd irony. Images of skeletons at desks, frogs drowning in energy drinks, captions that read, "Everything is falling apart," followed by a laugh track of emojis. This is doom posting, the practice of turning hopelessness into content, despair into memes. At first glance, doom posting looks like nothing more than dark humor. People laugh at what scares them. They share jokes about the future being ruined, jobs being pointless, the planet being doomed. But Carl Jung would look deeper. He would say, these are not simply jokes. They are expressions of the collective unconscious, symbols of despair emerging because society cannot speak them directly. Doom posting is not entertainment. It is the cultural shadow revealing itself in digital form. The archetype of collapse. Every civilization has carried myths of collapse. The flood that wipes away the world. The apocalypse that burns it down. The empire that decays into dust. Jung argued that such myths are archetypal. They express the fear that beneath all order lies fragility, that beneath civilization lurks chaos. Collapse myths remind us that what we build is temporary. Doom posting is the modern echo of these myths. Instead of prophets warning of divine judgment, we have memes of frogs, skeletons, and tired men warning of debt, burnout, and ecological ruin. The archetype is the same: the collapse of order, the end of stability, the return of chaos. Only the costume has changed. The function of irony. Why do people laugh at collapse? Jung would answer, because the shadow must be faced somehow. If despair cannot be spoken openly, it disguises itself as humor. Laughter provides distance, making unbearable truths tolerable. This is why memes about climate catastrophe, political corruption, or economic hopelessness spread so widely. People may not know how to fix these problems, but they can share a joke about them. Irony becomes a survival mechanism, but irony also carries danger. Jung warned that when the shadow is trivialized, it is not confronted. By laughing at despair, we risk dismissing it rather than addressing it. The archetype of collapse is not harmless. It demands recognition. Ignoring it or laughing it away does not make it vanish. It festers in the unconscious, influencing behavior without our awareness. Historical parallels. History gives us many examples of collapse humor. In the late Roman Empire, satire and jokes about decadence circulated even as the empire decayed. In Weimar Germany of the 1920s, cabarets overflowed with black humor about poverty, inflation, and corruption. During the World Wars, soldiers created grim cartoons mocking death itself. In each case, humor provided relief, but it also revealed the despair of the age. Doom posting continues this tradition. It is the cabaret of our time, performed not on stages but on screens. It tells us what statistics and headlines often fail to capture: the emotional reality of living in a world that feels unstable. Jung's wounded healer. Jung identified the archetype of the wounded healer, those who, by confronting their own wounds, can help others. Doom posting in its healthiest form might serve this role. By admitting despair, even ironically, people find solidarity. They realize they are not alone. The wound is shared. Humor becomes a form of collective therapy. But without reflection, doom posting can trap people in paralysis. Instead of healing, the wound becomes identity. People begin to define themselves by despair, wearing cynicism as armor. The shadow consumes the self rather than being integrated. Jung would call this being possessed by the archetype. The Stoic contrast. Facing collapse without despair. The Stoics lived in times of plague, war, and political corruption. They too knew collapse. Marcus Aurelius ruled during plagues that killed millions. Seneca lived under the tyranny of Nero. Epictetus lived as a slave before teaching philosophy. Yet their response to collapse differed from doom posting. Instead of laughing at despair, they confronted it with discipline. Marcus wrote, "Do not act as if you were going to live 10,000 years. Death hangs over you. While you live, while it is in your power, be good." For him, collapse was not entertainment, it was a call to live virtuously. Seneca reminded himself daily that disaster was inevitable, but that character remained within his control. Epictetus insisted that freedom lay in mastering one's judgments, even if the world outside fell apart. The Stoic lesson is clear. Collapse is real, but despair is optional. The archetype of collapse cannot be erased, but it can be faced with courage rather than cynicism. Charisma at the edge of collapse. There is also a lesson here for relationships and influence. Doom posting often masks vulnerability with irony. But charisma grows when people are willing to face despair honestly and still remain steady. A leader who admits the difficulty of the times yet radiates calm becomes magnetic. In relationships, a friend who listens without dismissing despair, who acknowledges fears without mocking them, becomes a source of trust. This is not false optimism. The Stoics did not promise happy endings. They promised resilience. True charisma comes from embodying that resilience, acknowledging collapse but not surrendering to it. Awareness as liberation. To Jung, doom posting is valuable if it leads to awareness. If we can see in these memes the archetype of collapse, we can reflect. Why does this resonate? What shadow does it reveal in me? Am I laughing at despair to avoid feeling it? Or am I using humor to confront it? The Stoics would frame it differently. What is within my control here? The meme reminds me of chaos, but how can I live virtuously today? Regardless? By combining Jungian awareness with Stoic discipline, doom posting can be transformed from passive despair into active reflection. The rise of doom posting shows that beneath our feeds lies a collective anxiety. We fear collapse of systems, of futures, of meaning. We laugh at it because we cannot bear to face it directly. But laughter is not enough. Jung would urge us to listen to these symbols, to confront the shadow they reveal. The Stoics would urge us to discipline ourselves, to face collapse without surrender. The memes may be funny, but they carry a message. We are afraid. The challenge is what we do with that fear. Will we laugh until it consumes us? Or will we confront it and live consciously, even at the edge of collapse? The shadow of irony, why laughing at despair can blind us to action. Irony is one of the most powerful cultural tools of our time. It shields us from vulnerability, softens the blow of despair, and provides a language for feelings too heavy to name. Doom posting thrives on irony. It takes anxiety about the end of the world, the fragility of economies, or the emptiness of modern life, and disguises it in jokes. We laugh, we share, we nod knowingly. The weight feels lighter, at least for a moment. Carl Jung, however, would caution us. He would say, irony is a mask. Masks are not inherently bad. They allow us to express what we cannot otherwise. But masks also conceal. When irony becomes our primary mode of dealing with despair, we risk hiding the wound so well that we forget it exists. We laugh at collapse until collapse becomes entertainment. The shadow of irony is paralysis. Irony as defense mechanism. Jung understood defense mechanisms long before psychology named them. He saw how people avoid painful truths through projection, repression, or disguise. Irony is one such disguise. It allows us to acknowledge despair without really acknowledging it. The meme says, the world is doomed. But the laughter says, it doesn't matter. This is not trivial. When despair is expressed ironically, it loses urgency. Problems become content, not crises. Climate change, mental health collapse, political corruption, when filtered through irony, they feel too absurd to take seriously. We laugh, but the laughter disarms us. Jung would argue that this is the shadow of irony. Truth acknowledged but stripped of power. The trickster archetype. Irony belongs to the archetype of the trickster. The trickster mocks, inverts, reveals by hiding. In myths, the trickster exposes hypocrisy, but also confuses. He is both truth-teller and deceiver. Doom posting is trickster energy. It exposes despair, but disguises it in jokes. The trickster's danger is that he destabilizes without rebuilding. He destroys order, but does not create meaning. In cultural terms, this means endless cynicism. The shadow of irony is not just that it blinds us to action, but that it erodes the possibility of meaning itself. Historical warnings history offers parallels. In Weimar Germany, satire and black humor flourished as inflation and instability consumed daily life. Cabarets mocked collapse, and people laughed at their own despair. But the irony did not stop the rise of authoritarianism. If anything, it dulled urgency. People laughed while systems decayed, mistaking entertainment for resistance. Similarly, in the late Roman Empire, satire mocked decadence and corruption. Citizens joked about collapse even as it unfolded. Irony provided relief but prevented action. It was easier to laugh than to reform. Jung would say these cultures were possessed by the trickster archetype, unable to integrate shadow, trapped in laughter at their own demise. The modern version, doom-scrolling as ritual today, irony saturates digital life. Doom-scrolling is not just the act of consuming bad news. It is accompanied by memes that make despair palatable. The ritual is familiar. Read about catastrophe, share a joke about it, repeat. This cycle mirrors ritual patterns of old, but without sacredness or transformation. It is ritualized irony, endlessly repeating despair while keeping it at arm's length. The danger is that people begin to define themselves by irony. Cynicism becomes identity. To care openly looks naive. To hope looks foolish. To act looks pointless. Jung would warn that this is possession by the shadow of irony. Despair internalized so deeply that it can only be laughed at, never confronted. The Stoic critique of irony. The Stoics were not humorless, but they distrusted cynicism. Epictetus taught that if we mock everything, we take nothing seriously, not even ourselves. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily to confront reality directly, without disguises. If it is endurable, then endure it. Stop complaining. For the Stoics, irony as disguise would have been seen as weakness, a refusal to face life head-on. Seneca, too, criticized empty wit. He distinguished between humor that illuminates and humor that distracts. The former is sharp and clarifying. The latter is indulgent and paralyzing. In modern terms, this means memes can serve wisdom or escapism. Doom posting, if it sharpens awareness, may be useful. But if it dulls urgency, it becomes destructive. Practical dangers of irony. Irony's shadow manifests in 3 concrete ways. Normalization of crisis. By joking about collapse daily, we normalize it. Crisis becomes background noise. Instead of resisting, we adapt to despair as if it were inevitable. Erosion of authenticity. Irony discourages sincerity. To express fear or hope openly feels embarrassing. Relationships become layered with sarcasm, making genuine connection harder. Paralysis of action. Irony gives the illusion of coping while preventing actual coping. Sharing a meme feels like doing something, but it changes nothing. Jung would call this repression disguised as expression. The shadow is acknowledged but not integrated. The Stoics would call it wasted energy, attention spent on what is outside our control, instead of strengthening what is within it. Stoic alternative. Humor with purpose. The Stoics did not forbid laughter. They enjoyed humor, but always within the frame of discipline. Seneca himself wrote wry observations about human folly. The difference is that Stoic humor clarifies rather than conceals. It makes reality sharper, not blurrier. Imagine if doom posting were reframed in Stoic terms. Instead of "the world is doomed," haha, it might become, "life is fragile, so live well today." The humor remains, but it points toward action. This is the Stoic antidote to irony's shadow. Humor that strengthens, not paralyzes. Charisma through sincerity in relationships. Irony can corrode intimacy. When every emotion is masked in jokes, nothing feels safe to express. But charisma grows through sincerity. People are drawn to those who can balance humor with authenticity, those who laugh but also admit their fears directly. Jung would call this integration of shadow, facing despair without disguise. The Stoics would call it courage, speaking truth without fear of judgment. In practice, this means daring to be honest, even in an age that mocks sincerity. Authentic presence becomes magnetic precisely because it is rare. Practical steps beyond irony to avoid being blinded by irony. Consider these practices. Name the despair directly when you laugh at a doom post. Pause. What is the real fear beneath it? Name it. I'm afraid of economic instability. I'm worried about the climate. Naming removes the mask. Balance humor with action. Allow humor, but follow it with one small act. If a meme jokes about burnout, take a break. If it mocks climate collapse, recycle, donate, or plant something. Action integrates the shadow. Practice sincere speech in relationships. Risk honesty. Admit worries without disguise. Share vulnerability alongside humor. This deepens trust and charisma. Reframe humor stoically instead of despair disguised as laughter. Use humor to highlight resilience. Joke not about collapse being inevitable, but about your refusal to be broken by it. This is humor with purpose. Irony is powerful, but it must be handled carefully. Can lighten despair, but it can also paralyze. Doom posting shows us both sides. Humor as balm, and humor as blindness. Jung would remind us that irony belongs to the trickster. It reveals truth but hides it at the same time. To integrate the shadow, we must go beyond the mask. The Stoics would remind us to face reality directly, to use humor for clarity, not escape. In the end, irony is not the enemy. Blind irony is. To laugh consciously is wisdom. To laugh unconsciously is paralysis. The challenge of our age is to know the difference. Stoic resilience. Facing despair without surrender. The age of doom posting thrives on cynicism. It mocks collapse, dresses despair in jokes, and numbs fear with irony. Jung would say this is the shadow speaking, our collective unconscious admitting hopelessness without confronting it. But while Jung helps us understand the archetypal roots of despair, the Stoics show us how to respond. They lived in an age no less uncertain than ours, filled with wars, plagues, and tyrannies. Yet they cultivated a resilience that allowed them not to surrender to despair, but to live with steadiness in the face of chaos. Memento mori, remember you will die. The Stoics' most famous practice was memento mori, the remembrance of death. At first glance, this sounds morbid, a perfect companion to doom posting. But while doom posting laughs at death to avoid feeling it, the Stoics faced it directly. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." For the Stoic, remembering death is not despair. It is clarity. It strips away trivialities, revealing what matters. It dissolves the illusion of endless time, focusing the mind on virtue. Doom posting hides fear in irony. Memento mori dissolves fear in truth. Both confront mortality, but one distracts while the other disciplines. The discipline of control. Epictetus offered the most practical tool against despair. The distinction between what is in our control and what is not. Climate collapse, economic chaos, political dysfunction. These lie mostly outside individual control. But our judgments, our actions, our character, these remain ours. Some things are in our control and others not. He began his Enchiridion. Wisdom, for him, was accepting this division and living accordingly. Applied to doom posting, the lesson is sharp. Sharing memes about despair may feel cathartic, but it changes nothing. Energy is wasted on what cannot be controlled. The Stoic path redirects energy to what can be controlled. Daily actions, virtues, and choices. When we focus here, despair loses its grip. Seneca on the shortness of life. Seneca wrote often about wasted time. In On the Shortness of Life, he argued that life is long if lived wisely, but short if wasted in distraction. Doom posting is distraction disguised as awareness. It gives the illusion of reflection but produces no depth. Seneca would warn us, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." The cure is to reclaim time deliberately, investing it in philosophy, friendship, and self-command. Resilience as practice, not theory. The Stoics did not preach resilience as abstract ideal. They practiced it daily. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Each morning to prepare for insults, betrayals, and hardships. Epictetus rehearsed poverty and exile in imagination so he would not be surprised if they came. Seneca practiced voluntary discomfort, sleeping on hard beds, eating plain food, to train the mind to endure. These rituals turned resilience into muscle, not theory. For us, the application is clear. Instead of doom-posting about burnout, practice voluntary rest and discipline. Instead of joking about collapse, rehearse calmly how you would respond. Resilience is built through habits of preparation, not cycles of cynicism. Charisma through resilience in relationships. Resilience itself becomes charisma. In an age saturated with despair, people are drawn to those who radiate steadiness. A friend who listens without collapsing into cynicism is magnetic. A leader who acknowledges difficulty yet remains calm inspires trust. This is Stoic charisma, not performance but presence. Jung would say that the integrated self radiates wholeness. The Stoics would say that the disciplined self radiates freedom. In practice, this presence feels like calm gravity. Others sense it and align with it, much as a chaotic crowd is steadied by a single calm voice. Practical Stoic tools against doom-posting negative visualization each day. Imagine losing what you cherish: health, possessions, relationships. Far from depressing, this sharpens gratitude. Doom-posting mocks loss. The Stoic rehearses it to live more deeply. Journaling for control like Marcus. Write each day, what is in my control and what is not. Let this frame your attention. Doom-posting scatters energy outward. Stoic journaling brings it inward. Voluntary discomfort practice hardship deliberately. Cold showers, fasting, silence. This teaches the mind that loss is survivable. Doom-posting fears collapse. Stoicism rehearses it to dissolve fear. Community of depth seek friendships rooted in philosophy, not cynicism. Seneca valued letters of reflection over shallow entertainment. Choose companions who strengthen resilience rather than deepen despair. Daily reminder of mortality, keep memento mori close. A skull on the desk, a phrase in the journal, a reflection at dawn. Doom-posting jokes about death. Stoicism uses it as compass. Jung and the Stoics together. Jung would remind us that doom-posting reveals shadow. The despair we laugh at is real and must be faced. But Jung would also insist that shadow must be integrated, not projected endlessly. The Stoics provide the method of integration. Face despair directly, train the mind, live with discipline. Together, they offer a way to move from paralysis to presence. The deeper message of collapse memes tell us something crucial. People sense instability. They feel the fragility of systems. This awareness is not wrong, but humor alone is insufficient. The Stoics teach us to take this awareness seriously, to turn it into resilience. Despair without action enslaves. Despair faced with discipline liberates. The final reflection: doom-posting is the shadow of our age, irony disguising despair. Jung helps us see its archetypal roots. The collapse myth, the trickster's mask, the wounded healer's wound. But the Stoics give us a way forward. Remember death. Focus on what is in your control. Practice resilience daily. In doing so, despair becomes not a prison but a teacher. The memes will continue. The jokes will spread. But behind them lies the question each of us must answer. Will I laugh until collapse consumes me? Or will I live so that even collapse cannot break me? The Stoics would choose the latter. And if we listen, so can we. Integrating despair, turning shadow into strength. Doom-posting, collapse memes, and ironic despair reveal the shadow of our time. They show us what many cannot say directly. That the future feels fragile, that institutions feel hollow, that hope feels difficult. Jung teaches us that to ignore the shadow is to be ruled by it. The Stoics teach us that to fear despair is to waste life in paralysis. Together, they suggest a path. Integrate despair. Make it conscious. Transform it into strength. The necessity of integration. Jung believed that every shadow must be faced. Projection. Mocking others, laughing at collapse, dismissing despair, only pushes the shadow deeper. But the unconscious will not stay buried. It returns through dreams, symptoms, and symbols. Doom posting is one such return, despair erupting in ironic form. The task is not to suppress despair, but to integrate it. This means admitting honestly, yes, the world is unstable. Yes, collapse is possible. Yes, suffering is real. But it also means refusing to be possessed by despair. Integration transforms shadow into wisdom, wounds into guides. Without integration, despair enslaves. With integration, despair strengthens. The Stoic transformation of fear. The Stoics practiced integration in their own way. They did not deny fear. They rehearsed it. Epictetus taught students to imagine loss daily, not to terrify themselves, but to dissolve fear's hold. Seneca wrote letters about exile, poverty, and death, not to wallow in them, but to remind himself they were survivable. Marcus Aurelius meditated each morning on betrayal, rudeness, and hardship, not to despair, but to prepare. This practice, negative visualization, turns shadow into resilience. What doom posting mocks, Stoicism transforms. The collapse that inspires memes becomes rehearsal for strength. The despair that numbs becomes discipline. Practical integration in daily life. From meme to mirror. When you see a doom post, pause. Ask, what fear does this express in me? Is it financial insecurity, fear of mortality, distrust in systems? Write it down. Face it directly. The meme becomes a mirror, not just a joke. From irony to action. After laughter, take one action. If the meme mocks burnout, rest. If it jokes about climate, recycle or volunteer. Small actions dissolve paralysis. They reframe despair as invitation to act. From despair to gratitude, the Stoics balanced negative visualization with gratitude. By imagining loss, they valued what remained. When despair arises, pair it with thanks. For life, for friends, for breath. Gratitude integrates despair by reminding us of what is still good. From shadow to teaching. Use wounds as teachers. Share not only the joke but the reflection it sparked. Speak about despair honestly in relationships. This vulnerability turns shadow into connection, wounds into wisdom. Charisma through steadiness. One of the most overlooked aspects of integration is its effect on charisma. People are drawn not to those who avoid despair, but to those who face it and remain steady. A person who admits difficulty yet radiates calm becomes a source of trust. Jung would call this the individuation process, becoming whole by integrating shadow. The Stoics would call it freedom, living with equanimity in chaos. In relationships, this presence is magnetic. When friends express despair, you do not dismiss or joke but listen steadily. When crises erupt, you acknowledge fear but act calmly. This steadiness is charisma at its highest form. Not dazzling spectacle, but gravity. The archetype of the hero. Integration also aligns us with the hero archetype. In myth, the hero does not avoid the underworld. He enters it, faces its dangers, and returns with treasure. Doom posting reveals our collective underworld. The memes are maps of despair. But to laugh and stop there is to remain trapped. To reflect, act, and integrate is to return with wisdom. The archetype of the hero is not the one who avoids collapse, but the one who lives meaningfully despite it. Historical examples of integrated despair. History gives us figures who transformed despair into strength. Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations not in luxury, but amid plagues and wars. His calm reflections have endured because they were born from despair faced, not denied. Viktor Frankl, though not a Stoic, embodied the same truth in man's search for meaning. Suffering cannot be erased, but it can be given meaning. These figures remind us. Despair integrated becomes wisdom. Shadow-faced becomes light. Doom posting, in its ironic way, hints at the same need. It shows wounds. The challenge is to transform them. Practical charisma in relationships. Admit vulnerability instead of masking despair with irony. Admit it openly. I'm worried about the future. Vulnerability invites connection. Radiate calm. Do not dismiss despair, but remain steady. Calm presence reassures more than words. Offer perspective. Draw from Stoic practice. Remind others. Some things are beyond control, but virtue remains ours. perspective steadies fear. Led by example, practice resilience daily. When others see you living calmly in chaos, they are drawn to it. This is charisma through integration. From doom to depth in the end, doom posting reveals the truth of our time. People feel fragile, hopeless, uncertain. Jung would say this is the shadow surfacing. The Stoics would say this is the test of philosophy. Both insist that despair cannot be ignored. It must be faced, integrated, and transformed. Doom posting without reflection is paralysis. Doom posting with reflection can be doorway, can move us from shallow laughter to deep awareness. From despair as identity to despair as teacher. From shadow as enemy to shadow as strength. The final reflection, the internet's collapse. Humor may feel endless, but its archetypal meaning is clear. It is our age's cry of woundedness. To dismiss it as trivial is blindness. To drown in it is paralysis. The challenge is integration. Jung would urge us to bring despair into consciousness, to own it as part of ourselves. The Stoics would urge us to face it with discipline, to practice virtue despite it. Together, they give us the tools to transform doom posting into something more. A cultural mirror, a personal challenge, and a chance for growth. The memes may laugh at collapse, but we need not laugh blindly. We can see the shadow, face it, and live awake. In doing so, despair becomes not the end, but the beginning of wisdom. Jung and Stoicism in the age of memes. Why symbols still rule us? We live in a world of memes. They are dismissed as trivial, fleeting images that rise and fall in the endless scroll of digital feeds. But Carl Jung would insist otherwise. He would tell us that memes are modern myths, symbols erupting from the collective unconscious. They may look shallow, but they carry the same forces that animated ancient stories, rituals, and archetypes. The faceless NPC, the viral dance, the doom post of collapse, these are not just jokes. They are symbolic expressions of our deepest fears and desires. And yet, Jung would also warn us, symbols left unconscious enslave. Archetypes do not vanish when we ignore them. They act upon us invisibly. When millions repeat viral dances without reflection, they enact ritual without meaning. When people mock others as NPCs, they project their own shadow unconsciously. When doom posting becomes identity, despair rules silently. Jung's psychology is a warning. If we do not integrate symbols consciously, they possess us. Here is where the Stoics join the conversation. They did not speak of archetypes, but they knew the same truth in different language. Epictetus warned that most people live as slaves to impressions, echoing the crowd without reflection. Marcus Aurelius cautioned against losing oneself in approval, reminding himself daily to stand firm against the tides of the mob. Seneca warned that wasting life in trivial distractions was more dangerous than death itself. The Stoics may not have spoken of memes, but their lessons apply directly. To live unconsciously is to be enslaved. To live with discipline is to be free. Symbols as modern gods. Jung believed that modern people fool themselves by thinking gods are dead. They are not gone, he said, they have become symptoms. The archetypes live on, appearing in new forms. In ancient Greece, people danced for Dionysus. Today, they dance for TikTok. In the Middle Ages, peasants feared demons of conformity. Today, we fear NPCs. In apocalyptic myths, people saw floods or fire. Today, we laugh at doom posts about climate collapse. The gods have not vanished. They have migrated. This migration does not diminish their power. Memes are not less than myths, they are our myths. They carry archetypes into daily life, shaping our behavior silently. Jung's warning is sharp. When we dismiss them, we surrender to them. When we analyze them, we reclaim freedom. The Stoic demand for awareness. The Stoics arrive at the same point from another path. They ask us to practice constant reflection, to examine our judgments daily. Marcus wrote each night about where he faltered. Epictetus demanded that students pause before reacting. Seneca measured his use of time. These practices are ways of bringing unconscious patterns into light. Applied to memes, the Stoic question is clear. Why am I sharing this? Why does this joke resonate? Am I thinking or repeating? What is in my control here? Awareness transforms memes from scripts into mirrors. Without awareness, we live as NPCs. With awareness, we use symbols as teachers. Charisma as the meeting of Jung and Stoicism. There is also a practical payoff in charisma. Jung teaches that individuation, the process of integrating shadow and persona into wholeness, creates presence. The Stoics teach that self-command radiates calm. Put together, they reveal the secret of charisma, authenticity rooted in self-mastery. In an age of viral mimicry, the person who thinks deeply, listens fully, and acts steadily becomes magnetic. Others sense wholeness. They feel gravity. This charisma is not manipulation. It is the natural influence of someone awake in a culture of sleep. The archetype of awakening. Every age longs for awakening. In myth, the sleeper rises, the hero returns from the underworld. The prophet speaks truth to the blind. Today, this archetype takes the form of those who resist unconscious memes. They do not mock NPCs, they refuse to live as NPCs. They do not drown in doom posting. They turn despair into discipline. They do not join every viral ritual, they choose their rituals with care. Jung would say they have integrated the unconscious. The Stoics would say they live in accordance with reason. Both describe the same archetype, the awakened individual who remains steady while the crowd drifts. Practical synthesis. Living Jung and Stoicism online. Treat memes as symbols, do not dismiss them as trivial. Ask what archetype they reveal. Use them as mirrors for the collective unconscious. Practice daily reflection like Marcus Aurelius. Review your day. What memes or trends shaped your mind? Did you repeat unconsciously, or did you choose? Integrate shadow when you laugh at NPCs, doom posts, or dances. Ask, what fear of mind does this reflect? Do not project, reflect. Apply Stoic control. Shift energy from what memes say you cannot control to what you can. Your speech, actions, presence, and relationships. Cultivate charisma through steadiness. Resist mimicry. Practice calm presence in relationships. Be the person who radiates authenticity in a culture of scripts. Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The Stoics taught, you may not control events, but you can control yourself. These are not separate messages. They are one. In the age of memes, they are urgent. We cannot escape archetypes. We cannot erase memes, but we can choose how to live among them. We can treat them as scripts and remain NPCs, or we can treat them as symbols and awaken. We can laugh at despair until it consumes us, or we can face it until it transforms us. We can dance unconsciously for algorithms, or we can create rituals that align with meaning. Awakening. In the age of memes, we began with laughter. A gray, faceless figure mocked as the NPC. Billions dancing the same steps on TikTok. Memes of collapse framed in irony. Doom posting despair disguised as humor. At first glance, these seemed like trivial distractions. Jokes, entertainment, noise in the endless scroll of digital life. But as we followed Jung into the unconscious, we discovered they were not trivial at all. They were archetypes. They were symbols. They were modern myths. Jung showed us that societies dream just as individuals do. Our dreams take the form of images, stories, rituals, and in the digital age, memes. The NPC revealed our fear of lifelessness, of becoming scripts instead of selves. TikTok dances revealed our hunger for ritual synchrony, for belonging in rhythm, even when meaning is absent. Doom posting revealed our shadow of despair, the unspoken sense that collapse lurks at the edges of our lives. Each of these trends is a mask of the collective unconscious, a way for culture to express what it cannot say outright. The danger, Jung warned, is that when symbols are dismissed, they enslave us. If we laugh at NPCs without reflection, we remain NPCs ourselves. If we dance without meaning, ritual consumes us instead of transforming us. If we doom post endlessly, despair becomes identity. Archetypes demand recognition. They will act upon us whether we acknowledge them or not. Only by bringing them into consciousness do we reclaim freedom. This is where the Stoics sharpen the picture. They remind us that freedom does not lie in controlling the world, but in mastering ourselves. They teach us to distinguish what is in our control from what is not, to live in accordance with virtue, to face despair not with irony but with discipline. Marcus Aurelius wrote during plagues and wars. Epictetus spoke after slavery. Seneca wrote under tyranny. Each faced collapse more terrifying than memes, and each responded with steadiness. Their resilience was not denial but clarity. Their charisma was not performance but presence. Together, Jung and the Stoics give us a philosophy for the algorithmic age. Jung teaches us to see memes as symbols, mirrors of the unconscious. The Stoics teach us to choose our response, to live awake in a culture of drift. Jung urges us to integrate shadow. The Stoics teach us to practice discipline. One reveals why we laugh at despair, the other shows how not to be consumed by it. What does this mean for us? It means that when we see NPC memes, we should not only laugh at others but ask, where am I scripted? When we join viral dances, we should ask, what ritual do I truly want to embody? When we share collapse memes, we should ask, what despair am I avoiding, and what can I do within my control today? It also means rethinking charisma. True influence is not found in performing trends, but in resisting them with authenticity. People are drawn to those who listen deeply, act steadily, and live consciously. Charisma in the age of memes is not spectacle but substance. It is the presence of someone who integrates shadow and practices discipline. Most of all, it means living awake. In the endless scroll, unconsciousness is easy. We repeat, we laugh, we drift. But the challenge Jung and the Stoics set before us is harder. To see, to reflect, to choose. To live not as NPCs, not as doom posters, not as puppets of algorithms, but as selves, as individuals, as awake beings in a culture of sleep. The archetype of awakening, every myth ends with a return. The hero enters the underworld, confronts shadow, and emerges changed. The wounded healer faces wounds and returns with wisdom. In our time, the underworld is digital, the shadow is memes, and the task is the same, to awaken. Jung's words echo. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The Stoics echo too. You may not control events, but you can control yourself. These voices converge on one truth. The only true freedom is awareness. The memes will not stop. New NPCs will appear. New dances will rise. New doom posts will spread. Archetypes cannot be erased. They will return again and again in different costumes. The choice is not whether they will act upon us, but whether we will act with awareness. So when you next scroll and see the faceless gray figure, the synchronized dancers, the ironic collapse jokes, pause. Do not dismiss them. Do not drown in them. See them as symbols. Reflect on what they reveal. Choose your response consciously. For the difference between sleep and awakening, between slavery and freedom, lies not in the memes themselves, but in how we live among them. Jung and the Stoics give us the tools. The rest is up to us. Live awake. What you've just heard is not simply a story about memes. It's a mirror, a reminder that every joke hides a shadow, every ritual hides an archetype, and every laugh at despair hides a choice. Carl Jung warned us. Symbols direct our lives if we ignore them. The Stoics reminded us, freedom begins with awareness. So ask yourself, are you living awake? Or are you repeating lines in someone else's script? The answer matters more than any trend, because it shapes the life you'll carry beyond the screen. If this journey spoke to something in you, if you felt the pull of recognition, the sense that you've glimpsed the deeper patterns beneath the noise, then stay with us. Subscribe so you don't miss the next step into the shadows and symbols that shape us all. Share your thoughts below, your reflections, your doubts, your own encounters with these archetypes. This is not just content. It's conversation. And if you found even a spark of clarity here, leave a like. It helps more people discover this space. More minds searching, more souls resisting sleep. Because in the end, the world doesn't need more NPCs. It needs more of us awake.